Hello and welcome, listeners, back to the show. Today we have a really special episode. I have Eric, the Mad King, here with us today to talk about Korvold. So, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, you might not be aware that I'm a diehard Korvold player. Absolutely love playing the deck, and Eric is, in my opinion, the GOAT on Korvold, the number one Korvold player ever in CEDH. So, I'm really excited to have Eric here today. The goal of this podcast is to talk to anyone who have thoughts about playing Korvold or have flirted with Korvold in any capacity, whether that's playing with or against it in CEDH, and we're excited to talk about it. So I'll hand it over to Eric to kind of give us a little introduction.
Hey everybody, my name's Eric Taylor, affectionately called the Mad King over a deck that I created a long time ago. I just enjoy playing CEDH, and I'm a pretty easygoing guy. We're just going to kind of dive into it and really just try to bring as much digestible information, maybe break some misconceptions, or actually reveal that the deck and the synergies are more powerful than you conceptually think.
For sure. And just to like give a little backstory on you, how long have you been playing Korvold?
Literally the day it came out and it was legal.
That's what we like to hear, 100%. And backstory for me, when I first started playing your version of this deck, or something close to it. So basically, when I started playing CEDH, I picked Korvold. I said, look, I love Jund in 60 card. I think I want to play a Jund CEDH commander. And there really was only one option. So I saw your list and the bad list. Capital BAD for those listeners, not like actually someone who's a bad list, but ended up basically proxying that deck and then had gotten a ton of reps on it and then slowly just decided, hey, I'm going to just only play Korvold. And everything I've learned about the deck since either late 2021 or early 22, I'm not exactly sure when I started playing, was 100% through you and through the Discord itself. So before we even get started into this, if you want to get information on Korvold or have a community related to Korvold, there will be a link to the Korvold Discord in the description down below. We absolutely love talking Korvold in there and are a very welcoming community overall. So please check that out. But yeah, thanks to Eric, I have been playing this list since I would say about 2022. Didn't start actually like jumping into tournaments with it until 2023, but everything I have learned has been through you, and I'm just super excited to finally get to deep dive into Korvold. So yeah, let's kind of talk about our current lists. So right now, you are running the classic Mad King list, but it's a little spicy. I just checked it out. So we first started talking about doing this podcast. Your list looked completely different. You were on Food Chain. There's a lot of stuff going on, and now you have like this mini lands package that I just like am so excited to talk about. So why don't we kind of give a generalization of like what your list is trying to do right now?
Well, right now, the way I look at it is that the current format is for the average player. They call it mid-range hell or
Mm-hmm.
just a very grindy format where people hold resources. They don't go for the win or they flash on top of each other. This is very reminiscent of the old flash and medium green meta, where medium green basically always holds the ball and never wants to give it up. And Flash Hulk, I'm sure everybody who's ever played CDH a few years ago knows that they're just trying to flash the card itself on top of you and putting a Protean Hulk. And now we have, I think, far superior enablers and just better card quality overall.
100%.
So the way I look at this list is the turbo meta kind of died down. And if you notice, as natural evolution is happening, we're starting to see decks speed up or choosing to just play more options that win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not playing as much. So we're starting to get to more of a healthy balance. What the idea of this deck is to do what Korvold does very well, is be explosive and have the ability to recover. And so I feel like the list that I wanted to share with you today is specifically the list I will be bringing to the 10K later this week in Nashville.
Hell yeah.
So that is why I haven't posted this list. I really don't want most people to know that I'm on this mini Landsfall package because these
Mm-hmm.
cards are ultra explosive. And I'm sure Kyle's going to be able to talk about his love for these because they are phenomenal for what the deck ultimately wants to be, a turbo, explosive, ad nauseum, or necro deck.
Yep, 100%. And I think ideally, this is probably going to be coming out or released like the day after the event or close to it. So don't worry, your secrets are safe with me. But I really wanted to kind of talk about, your goals for the deck. I know explicitly you just mentioned Ad Nauseam and Necro. I did also notice that there are a couple of other lines that you like to go through. Is there any other highlight to the deck that you would put up there on the pedestal next to Necro or Ad Nauseam in terms of like the general goal of the deck?
First off, Modern Horizons 3 to me saved Korvold. Like without
Mm-hmm.
that set has, I think I went through it. I think it has like 30 to 40 playable CDH cards in it. To me, it's the most
Yeah.
impactful set from a health standpoint for CDH as a whole. May not be the best quality cards in a vacuum, but the overall effect for multiple decks that aren't inherently tier one decks, MH3 was great. So I'm looking at mostly six and Warren Soul Trader. I
Yeah.
think both of those cards are equally as powerful in their own respective way. I think Warren Soul Trader is actually cracked in Korvold specifically,
100%.
and the card is just good in other decks, as like we see in Marnius as well. But those two cards, I think, are also what allow you to play this mini lands package and allow you to still basically build your own Peer into the Abyss and draw 30 to 60 cards with Warren Soul Trader and Chatterfang.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I was really hoping that you were going to respond with six because, leading into the list that I'm currently running, I'm running a lands based build. So I am about 15 cards different, and majority of that is land support. So I'm so glad you mentioned six because six is like half of my deck right now. I think that for the lands package, six means so much, especially in terms of strategy and mulligans. Like my goal is to try to figure out a way to deploy six to the board. And the other side of that coin for the lands-based version is deploying Nissa early. So Nissa, Resurgent Animist, is going to give you an explosion of mana, especially with fetch lands or with the ability to put more lands into play via something like a Croson Wayfarer or via something even like a GSZ for zero. So my goal for that list is to just create tons of mana and then hope that the inherent card draw that I have through this large amount of mana will be able to get me to the finish line. And I do think that that's something that is a little bit of one of the major differences between our lists is I think that your list will see more cards and see higher quality cards, whereas my list kind of just will make larger amounts of mana, but maybe be a little more restricted on what you can do with that pool of mana. Since we're kind of talking about the differences just in general between our two lists, how do you also see the difference between like a lands focused build and your build?
So I think ultimately, if you were to remove the like, say 15 to 20 like cards for the support, ultimately your deck is this super powerful, big mana, explosive deck that's masquerading around as a lands package. It is a lands deck, but I think you're sneakily able to just still do the thing
Yeah,
because if you haven't seen Kyle's list, I believe his CMC is 1.15 if memory serves me correct.
it's close to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm right about 1.16, give or take. Sometimes I want to put Slaughter Pact in over Lightning Bolt just to get it down to that
See, there you
nice,
go.
like to that nice, like even number.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're functionally similar. The difference is how they want to like where do you want to go? Is your strength more into ad nauseum or
Hmm.
is your strength more into the lands package? You've opted for the lands package to be more all in on the lands package,
Hmm.
which by the way, if people are trying to grind Kyle's deck list out without like blue cards or Thassa's Oracle to end the game, I don't think you're going to be able to do that just because what that deck does is actually probably it's once it's doing the thing, it's on that same tier as Rog Thras, and people are very much over the moon of that deck right now.
Yeah.
That deck is basically using Cradle like Dockside. That's our format right now. Is
Hmm.
Cradle has become Dockside, and that's what we're trying to do is who can abuse it the best. And the way I think is who has the best balanced approach
Yeah.
specifically my list, it's the turbo ad nauseum list that's basically
Hmm.
utilizing the land package, which is a very small package. Like I don't think people realize like when
Yeah.
they see lands like those kind of cards, they're like, oh, it's an entire lands list. I basically swapped bad food chain cards for good cards. That's what I did. Sorry, food chain lovers. We'll talk about
We'll
that
talk about
later.
that later. Yeah. Oh, 100%. I agree with you. And the way you just described it, I think is like the most simple way that we can talk about the differences between our deck. Your deck, I would easily say, is faster, has access to more explosive card draw through Necro. If you're just the fact that you play Necro and I don't play Necro is like a huge difference in how you view mulligans, tutors, everything, right? So your deck is faster and has more, I would say, diverse avenues. My deck is slower and kind of takes the approach of I'm going to get to an insurmountable board state, at which point I don't really care what you're doing. I'm probably still going to win. And I think that's kind of like the feel that Rogthras has too, because at a certain point, you're like, holy shit, this Rogthras just has all of these untappers. Everything is going. They're spinning Thrasios 4 times. What is happening, right? That is the model at which I created my list, is like, I just want to get to an insurmountable board state and then be able to win regardless of whatever counterspell, whatever Flusterstorm that you have in your hand. I just don't care. Sure, you can counter it. I have so much mana. I'll just do the next thing. That's my thought process with it. And the reason specifically I play the list, this version of my list, is because I'm in the Pacific Northwest meta, and we are the most control heavy meta that I have ever played in. And I've only played in 3 different metas, but that being said, of those 3, it's not even close how control heavy the Pacific Northwest is. Every game is like going to time. It's crazy. So cool. Without further ado, I would like to move into a deep dive of the Mad King list. How's that sound?
That sounds pretty good.
All right, let's talk about it. So, Mad King list, I just kind of want to talk about your thought process, because this is a question that we get asked in the Discord all the time. Knock, knock. I'm a new member of the Korvold Discord. Hey, I thought this deck was dead. You guys can still play this post-dockside? How have you adapted this deck, post-dockside ban, into the list it is today?
Through a lot of time and failed attempts. Honestly, when the dockside ban happened, obviously, you probably got a million messages. It was like people
Yeah.
literally messaged me like a family member passed
Oh,
away.
100%. 100%.
They're like, you're the first person I thought of. And I'm just like, but I have won like 50% of my tournament matches without ever casting a dockside. but
Yeah.
but I understand there's this weird, like, this is where the CDH player and me, the commander player, is there, even though I was a 60 card grinder for a long time, is
Mhm.
that there's something about that little goblin that's just so lovable, despite some people hating him. It's like I
Yeah.
got attached to that card as a, full context. I love that card. Like it was sad
100%.
watching my Japanese foil retro dockside not be playable anymore was
Yeah.
sad. But to get back on topic, luckily there's a bad and good here that I thought that happened with the ban. Korvold's not a huge community in the CDH sphere. There's a lot of variations out there because we don't have like Blue Farm. People can say,
Mhm.
"Oh, my Blue Farm list is different." Your Blue Farm list is 5 different cards, like every single
Yeah.
time. Like,
Yeah.
like I don't care. It's ultimately like, "Oh, am I going to play one more creature? Am I going to play one more signet? Ooh, am I 27 or 28 lands?" That's Blue Farm in a nutshell.
Mhm.
And I very much believe that deck is the best deck as a whole
Agreed.
macro for the last like million years. And
Yeah, we're not
and
shit
and
talking it. We're just like,
no,
yeah, that's the best. Yeah.
people go, "Oh, this deck's different." So because Corval doesn't have that large community, there was never a modified list. There was never a set list that you
Mhm.
could just like Rogside. Rogside is to me the pinnacle of that type of thing. You can basically just pick a Rogside list, 2 to 3 cards different, unless somebody's trying to be like spicy with their list specifically.
Yeah.
Because Corvold had so many variations and builds, I tried to go back into the different types of things that were successful, maybe successful, kind of on the back burner, whether it was Food Chain, Dual Caster Mage, back on the full SKA package with Witherbloom Apprentice, cutting, Ruthless Technomancer, putting it back in, and then just all these different things. Because for me specifically, without like really Kyle, there's really not that many other people who play Corvold in the tournament scene on a larger scale.
Yeah.
And full context, I spent the last 9 months learning to be a doula for my new baby that just got born. So
Congratulations, by the way. Shout out baby
thank you.
Lucas.
Baby Lucas is the man. I do have a funny story about him and specifically for the 10K and why I'm playing the sleeves that I'm playing, but we'll maybe talk about that later. It's not really quite important,
Okay.
but it's a memento to him effectively. So that pulls me out of the tournament scene. So that's one of the, without making myself sound like arrogant or anything, that's one of the tournament players who play Corvold out of the pool.
One of the handful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a large percentage of the tournament players. Just one person stopping.
Yeah. And At first, I just didn't have quite the passion to rebuild a deck from the ground up because I spent years breaking the mold that was already there because the
Yeah.
deck database, while I do appreciate what the deck database does,
Hmm.
ultimately for the longest time before EDH top 16, if you don't get your list on the database, like nobody believes in your list, and
100%.
that's how it was
That's
in the
how it was.
beginning. And so at the time, it was the Food Chain list, Brayden's Treasure Storm list, and then the bad list.
Yes.
So those were the only variations.
Mhm.
And the problem is those weren't translating to tournaments.
Mm.
So that's where I came in and I started kind of messing around with the different types of lists, and we kind of got the Mad King. Ultimately, the Mad King is a philosophy of the deck being what's best for the moment and it being modal.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. It doesn't matter like what inherently we want win cons. We want the ability to be good quality cards and then just whatever fits best into your meta.
Flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that when I started playing your list, I was like, holy shit, this deck is so flexible. I feel confident playing it into any pod composition. I never sit down and I think to myself, like, oh, this is a nightmare. Like, I can't win this game. Like, sure, I joke about that in tournaments all the time. So sometimes I see decks that I personally like, I don't necessarily like playing against, but it doesn't mean that I feel like I can't win against them, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the flexibility of the deck and the fact that it is non-linear is what draws people to the list in general and what keeps people playing the list. And I will note just before we keep moving forward that, in terms of like the number of Korvold pilots, I think that there were quite a few good pilots who, after the ban, at least attempted to like play Korvold and at least attempted to brew it, but I feel like it kind of fell off. Like, and I do not fault them one bit. A lot of them are friends of mine. So if you're listening to this, you probably know exactly who I'm talking to. We were faced with a big gut punch, and not everyone wants to start over from ground zero, right? And that's kind of what it felt like we were doing. And it's just so much work and effort to get back to a polished list. That's the difference, right? Is like even when you start winning games, that doesn't mean your list feels polished whatsoever. And as you get reps on it, you'll know. Like you can feel it. The first list that I made that was lands based post ban, I was like, as I was playing it, I was winning games. I was like, this deck is awful. Like I was like, this deck is terrible. Like as I'm playing it, I was on like World Gorger and shit. And I was playing
Oh.
it because I'm like, I'm trying to innovate. Like I want to feel, I'm a big feel guy when it comes to playing the deck. There's this intangible feeling of like knowing what's working and what's not. And when I picked up your list for the first time, when I proxied that thing, because I had like not been playing Magic for the longest time, I had no cards. So I was like, okay, whatever. Just gonna try it out because I had a bunch of friends who were playing CEDH. Shout out to that crew in California back when I lived there. But your list, I picked it up and I was like, holy shit, this just feels good. It feels amazing. So I really like that you have this focus on versatility and this non-linear approach where you're like, yeah, this card can fill 5 different roles in the deck. Like whatever you need it to do, it can do it. So let's get into like how Korvold, the commander, functions in your list and like what value it brings to the list and how much it really matters when you're playing the deck.
So with the way the Mad King is currently built, and I believe this a lot for most Corval builds, especially it being a 5 mana commander and it being in Jund without the protection of blue or even specifically white as well.
Yeah.
Your deck needs to be able to function without the commander very well, and with the commander, it's to the moon. That's the way I look at it, and that's
Hmm.
where I think the actual strength of Korvold is post ban. And you wouldn't think that because typically you're like, well, the dockside thing was broken, and it was the dockside. But I've played a lot of tournaments where dockside made 2 mana or one,
Yeah.
just for people mulliganing really low, or a
Mm-hmm.
culling ritual hits the board, something like that, or it always had tension with culling ritual in your own deck.
Yeah.
Where Corvold's at now, and this list specifically, we've got the 2 paths. We have the 6 path and the lands path, the small lands path, and
Mm-hmm.
then we have the Warren Soul Trader path. All those function without Corvold on the battlefield to some degree, and
Yeah.
2 of them specifically don't need Corvold at all. And then they just allow you to Corvold's just that
Exactly.
extra icing on the cake.
Of those three, just go ahead and describe which one you're talking about.
Warren Soul Trader and Chatterfang basically allow you to, as long as you have another creature on the board, and it can be Corvold. You could just sack your
Mm-hmm.
Corvold if you have to. You're basically going to have a replacement effect. If you don't know, the cards will be on your screen.
Yep.
But you're basically going to sack a creature once you have Warren Soul Trader and Chatterfang out. and then it's going to have a replacement effect. There will be a squirrel and a treasure will be made. You'll sack the new squirrel, making a new treasure, creating basically peer into the abyss like effect for treasures. Once you get to a point to where you just want to recast your Korvold, you'll probably have, more mana available
Yeah.
anyways. Just recast your Korvold, pay 20 to 25 life or whatever you have, keep your life kind of comfortably safe for forbidden tutors, those types of things,
Hmm.
and then just draw like 50 cards
Yeah. Win the game through that way. Yeah.
with 25 mana left over and just largely ignoring Ristic Study.
100%. It's so nice.
And then the other path that we're talking about is the Aftermath Analyst path. And I don't want to talk too much about that because I would like for Kyle specifically to dive into it because that's a core function of his list.
Hmm.
But I personally believe the way Aftermath Analysts, Squandered Resources, and Shifting Woodlands, by the way, all of those cards are decent on their own. Most lists already play. If you're on green, you're probably playing Shifting Woodlands. Squandered Resources is a very good card on itself. And then Aftermath Analyst at its floor is a ramp spell. It's going to
Yeah.
provide a body. It's going to allow you to the ramp to that mid game. If you're just getting back like a cycled Beseiju and 3 fetch lands for 4 mana, draw a card.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, you get to untap with a massive resource.
Yeah.
And that's where that's at. Again, another combo that I'm going to let you dive through. But again, through Ristic Study, largely ignores everything else, which is awesome. And then 6 just being like this.
It's a house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if Eternal Witness was still good in our deck. But like, because that card was amazing at one point, but 6
Yeah.
basically kind of pushed that card completely out of our list. And it allows to basically always have access to Breach, your combos, cards. I can't say enough about that card. So that's kind of the 3 core non-Nas Necro functions of those combos.
Yeah, and just while we're talking about Korvold in general, when people ask the question like, "Why Korvold? Why are you playing this deck?" I respond the same way every single time, and I still believe that Korvold is the most explosive card draw commander you can play, specifically with that emphasis on explosive, and that is why I love it so much. The idea that sure, over time, will a Timnacrom draw more cards between the two of them? Maybe, but I get to draw a chunk of cards when I want to, and that's the key of Korvold. It's kind of like Plagon in that sense, where like Plagon can explosively draw a ton of cards, right? I agree with that. So someone else would be like, "Oh, well, what about Plagon?" It's like, yeah, but then you're in Azorius, and what are you gonna do with those cards? So that's what draws me to Korvold specifically, is like the explosiveness of the draw is what gives it so much power. If I can decide when I want my card draw and put it all together in one specific point, that's more important to me than drawing more cards over time, if that makes sense.
I agree with that. And just Korvold rewards you for just playing the game of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
So you're playing cards in a Turbo Ad Nauseam list like Diabolic Intent, Calling the Weak, Fetch Lands, those types of things. So when you basically read Calling the Weak as 1 black, sacrifice a creature, make 4 black mana, draw a card, that's pretty broken.
That's pretty
Like,
good. Yeah,
that's pretty good.
that's really good. All right, so let's talk about your actual win cons in the Mad King list. And this is another question that comes up in the Discord all the time. And I'm sure that you, the listener, have thought about this as well. It's like, okay, there are a lot of options when it comes to win cons and Jund. How do you decide on what kind of win con you're playing, and what are you currently on right now?
So I try to look at the meta as a whole and see what functions the best. Like what allows me to push an early win a tip without putting myself at a very negative disadvantage. You'll see lists like Atali that can run Food Chain very successfully
Yep.
because they're a super powerful explosive list that is 2 colors. So they can dedicate multiple slots to Nature's Claim, Natural State, Force of Vigor, those types of effects. When you're
Hmm.
in 3 colors, you do have the access to those, especially in Jund, but they're very premium removal spells. Like you have, whether it's Assassin's Trophy or Abrupt Decay. I don't always want to have to use those early on. I want to save those for maybe something else
Hmm.
specifically.
Specifically, you're bringing that up, I'm assuming, to destroy Ristic Studies or Smothering Tides or what have you when it comes to Atali, right? Okay, awesome.
Mhm.
Just wanted to point that out to the listeners, just in case they didn't know why this enchantment removal was so relevant early game.
Because that deck can't function without it. So with us
Exactly.
specifically, and I think those kind of cards are okay in Korvold, absolutely, if you have the slots. But even post ban slots are tight now. Like really, like I didn't think I
Hmm.
would ever say that, but it is. It's actually kind of hard to build a deck now because I'm always fighting over the last like 2 to 3 cards because it's like, okay, well, what do I really need? So where we're at with food chain is totally a viable option. And I don't want to discourage anybody from playing food chain. I actually like food chain if you are a dedicated food chain list where food chain is the primary goal. It has its ups and it has its downs,
Hmm.
but you need to dedicate a certain amount of explosiveness to your list because you have to get it out as fast as possible. And then I think you also have to make more concessions to playing that card. Something like having access to Beseech the Mirror because it tutors out your food chain.
Yep.
You just want more access to that card specifically. And then that's where I think cards like Six and Shifting Woodlands really kind of play into it because your food chain can be anywhere. You'll have access to it again. Same
Yeah.
with Squee. You don't mind milling over a Squee at all. But inherently, those cards, by and large, are really low card quality
Yeah.
and they don't perform well through Ristic Study. But in those types of lists where you're trying to basically turn 2, turn 3 food chain, you're trying to basically deploy the food chain combo before they can get a Ristic Study online.
Yeah.
That's where food chain's at in Korvold, and I think it just actually draws more slots and it needs more role players to make it more successful than just the natural process of what the deck can do.
Yeah, and I have two thoughts on food chain in general. And for those listeners who don't know, I'm the biggest Witherbloom Chainismog stan in the Corval Discord, probably. And even pre-ban, I have always been on it. I absolutely despise playing food chain. And one of the reasons I bring that up is because, like you were mentioning before, Ristic Study is such a problem when it comes to food chain decks that you not only have to dedicate support to food chain and getting food chain out early, but I think you have to dedicate resources like Force of Vigor or other ways to actually kill the Ristic studies. And by doing that and dedicating resources for enchantment removal, you're slowing yourself down in terms of not being able to play as much gas. So it's like this weird balance of you want to be able to go faster with the food chain list, but also now you have to play cards that are going to inherently use mana to remove something that your opponent has, which means that you're slowing down. And that weird tension between those two makes me really hesitant to play that combo. And not to mention you have to play Squee, which sucks.
The only time the only time Squee feels insane is when you put it under a Chrome Mox. You just go, "Oh,
True. You're like,
I'm
oh, I'm
winning. I'm
goaded.
winning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the best player at the table. It just
Yeah.
feels the
Or
best."
Gemstone
Uh,
Caverns, exiling Squee, got him. No, 100%. If Squee was just like a partner effect that you could just put off to the side, you know what I mean? And just like never have to worry about it, it would be way so good. But Food Chain puts you in this weird state. And sometimes you really have to overcommit with it too. If you don't have the mana to get to where you want to be, sometimes you have to end up sacking your own creatures. Sometimes it's even Korvold just to like get yourself over the edge if you don't have access to Squee or don't have access to immediately go infinite. And by doing that, I think it's a huge commitment, similar to Witherbloom Chain of Smog, which we'll get into next. But those are kind of how I see food chain. You just have to dedicate a lot of spots to protect the food chain, and you have to dedicate a lot of spots to protect the win line itself once food chain is deployed by removing Ristic studies, what have you. Yeah.
and the last thing that I'll say about food chain is you also have to dedicate typically an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be quite honest, most outlets are bad. Like right now, they're not very good. I
Yeah.
very much don't ever want to, as much as I've forced and tried running like Blood Artist effects and that type of stuff, they're pretty bad. They're just bad cards. I think Sephiroth is totally fine out of the new Final Fantasy set. Worst
Yeah.
case scenario, the artwork is ultra sweet in
Yeah, it's
all
sick.
3 versions.
Worst case scenario, you look cool.
You look cool and you have to run that card, but I really don't want to dedicate an outlet when I can just change a couple of cards in my list and the outlet's already in my deck
Yeah.
and just make it better. And we'll talk about when we get on the Chatterfang Warren Soul Trader. Chatterfang, we'll talk about him. He carries a lot of weight in this deck.
Yeah. And just something before we move on past food chain, I'm going to address a question we get in the Discord a lot. Or Eric, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about a common misconception, which is like that we see coming into the Discord, which is like, oh, but if you food chain, you're eventually going to deck yourself when you go infinite, right?
It's a weekly occurrence.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
and again, and I just saw this on a video literally yesterday,
Yeah.
posted on like a premium CDH channel, and luckily, Food Chain is a mana ability. It's activated ability, but it's a mana ability, so you can basically do it at instant speed. So Korvold has an enter the battlefield trigger, and then he has another trigger. So
Hmm.
basically, when the Korvold enters the battlefield, you put that trigger onto the stack, which would be the sacrifice effect. Then you exile the Korvold to the Food Chain. His then sacrifice trigger will resolve, but his draw trigger won't resolve because he's no longer on the battlefield. And that's how you
Correct.
don't deck yourself.
Correct. Yeah. So, commonly what we see as an outlet, whether or not it's a blood artist effect, you're going to be sacrificing Squee and killing Squee using some sort of outlet, whether it's a blood artist effect or like Mayhem Devil is another one we didn't talk about that a lot of people see as like the number one outlet for it. But you'll be able to sacrifice things without drawing cards if you want to. So that's just a key note since we get that question a lot in the Discord before we move on. All right, you ready to move on to the next one?
Let's do it.
All right, so next one's Wither Smog, or Wither Chain. It's said multiple ways, but realistically, it's Wither Bloom Apprentice and Chain of Smog. Eric, you're not currently on this. I'm always on it. So why don't you talk a little bit of why? Why don't you be the devil's advocate here and talk about why you're not on Wither Bloom Apprentice?
Well, I do want to give just a tiny bit of context on that. That is the combo that actually started the Mad King. That's literally
Hell
it.
yeah.
Just because that list was pre-ban was ultra heavy spell based,
Hmm.
and a lot of people. I'll give it a pro. I'm going to give it a pro for people because people always say, "Well, it's two dead cards, very similar to Food Chain." Witherbloom Apprentice, nobody really cares about it unless it's trying to win. So it's
Yeah.
gaining incremental advantage, and its post ad nauseum, post necro ability to protect your life and allow you to be ultra aggressive with those two is very much overlooked. I know when I played it, used to play it back in tournaments pre-ban, it was very good at that. And then if they kill it, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I've gained 6 life by that point, and it
Hmm.
was completely fine. Where we're at now, I think it's completely fine. In fact, I would love to be able to find out that I have 2 bad slots in my list,
And
and
just
then
slot it in. Yeah.
slot it in because I am on the turbo plan. I largely like to play my turbo decks without a dedicated win con, and I like to piece it together.
Yeah.
Um,
Praetor's Grasp is your permanent win con, but we'll get into that
yeah,
a little later.
where its cons are specifically in my list because I am trying to go fast, I can get blown out a little bit more. But
Hmm.
in Kyle's landfall list, if his hand doesn't matter and it's all about his graveyard and his loop effects with his lands, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter where his hand is at because he has
True.
access to his hand and his graveyard. It's like almost thinking like Dredge. Like he's playing a Dredge deck in that sense.
Yeah.
So who cares about your hand? It's all about the graveyard. So if he just puts an A plus B on the stack, it's like, okay, now you have to use resources. Oh, that's fine. You dealt with that. Okay. I'm just gonna keep trying to combo off from my graveyard or start looping land effects that way and gaining incremental advantage there and just simply refill my hand back to where it
Hmm.
was.
Hmm.
But where the list is at now, and I'm sure you'll talk about this, but the power of Witherbloom Apprentice is the green pip because it's tutorable by Summoner's Pact. And I think
Hell
if
yeah.
you are on a green Turbo Nas list, you have to play Summoner's Pact. I think that card is
So good.
so good and specifically very needed post ban and where we're at now. If you want to go fast, and it just gets so many pieces in the list. So I'm currently not on it. I'm not advocating anybody to not play it. I think if you can slot it in and protect it, it's completely worth it. It's very compact and very mana efficient. And it's in the best 2 colors in the list, which is in black and green, because that's
Yep.
where the lists have devolved to. There's no longer this where it used to be like red, black, green down here.
Yeah.
It's very much like
It's
heavy
Golgari
green.
splashing red. Yeah.
That's right. So
And since we're talking about Summoner's Pact right now, I might also say something that people forget about a lot and why it's so good post Nas is like you can just go get an Elvish Spirit Guide. So if you missed a pip, you just Summoner's Pact for your Elvish Spirit Guide. Boom. Now that Summoner's Pact is a second Elvish Spirit Guide, and the difference that can make post Nas is whew, it's absolutely nuts. Anyway, cool. Let's move on to probably the most important card in the deck, arguably, which is Underworld Breach. Eric, why don't you start us off? What role does Underworld Breach play in the Mad King list?
Underworld Breach, what can't we say about Underworld Breach? It's such a good card. I want to talk about its floor. Everybody always talks about its ceiling and it ends the game. Its floor is a red regrowth, effectively.
Hmm.
And that's a card that I wouldn't say we would run, but that's a card effect that we always enjoy to have.
Yeah.
And where Breach is at now in the list, it basically ends the game. And and if you don't know what Underworld Breach is, basically it allows you to play cards out of your graveyard through escaping 3 cards, and you can
Hmm.
keep recasting those cards as long as you have the requisite resources of cards in the graveyard and mana to cast them. But when the addition of 6 comes into play, and I'm in this spot now with Jun Turbo List specifically, that I can't talk about Breach without 6 because I feel like 6 effectively is a cousin of Breach, but
Yeah.
it always allows you to have access to Breach. So if they Besaju your Breach and you have a 6 out, you just recast your Breach.
Hmm.
And it allows you to use your Breach earlier and more aggressively to just get value back. And then if the Breach dies or if it gets blown up, you're fine because you have those kind of cards that just get it back, or it just gets copied by Shifting Woodlands.
Yeah, I was so hoping that you were going to say that because I think even more so than six, then the synergy with six is awesome because if you have six and breach on the field, it just gets even easier because every time you draw into a land, you can just pay a land for your Lion's Eye Diamond or your Lotus Petal to make mana instead of paying the 3 escape costs, and that's night and day difference. So you won't even need to have a way to really like fill your yard as much as you would do if you didn't have six because you can kind of cheat the permanence out with just a land that you draw naturally. But I think that Shifting Woodlands, the power of that card, and in the past, I would probably say 3 tournaments. I think half of my games that I have won have come from Shifting Woodlands to Breach. So like somebody has holding this Besage on for dear life, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna hit this breach, and then I just activate Shifting Woodlands, turn my Shifting Woodlands into a breach, and then give the table a thumbs up, and they go, damn, okay. So like that card is one of the best breach support, if not the best breach support that we've gotten. Which is really weird because it's like, is it really helping the game plan? No, but it's more like you are now able to use breach early, like you're saying, as an avenue just for value because you're going to have the ability to get it back in an uncounterable way. That's just incredible. And it's a line that newer Korvold pilots, if you're not used to doing that, you need to learn it because it's just an awesome synergy.
And the common theme of this podcast will be Modern Horizons 3, brought to you by Modern Horizons 3.
Yeah,
Because both Shifting Woodlands and 6 came from that set, which is kind of
it's insane.
that's just
And
good
Warren
deck
Soul
building.
Trader.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Really, any primer, anything like that's going to tell you about Underworld Breach. It just allows you to basically put the final stamp on the game. As long as you know how your deck wins,
Yeah.
then if you have Breach and you get to the point of Breach, whether it's something like Life from the Loam
Hmm.
or Grinding Station, or just somehow getting a nice loop of cards, whether it's like with a protected Wheel of Fortune, if you're like backed by Dosen or something,
Yeah.
you're just gonna get there with Breach. I don't think I've ever lost a tournament match when Breach is resolved. I think that's a lot for a lot of CDH players,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. When it resolves, you're you're
when
you're
it
sitting
resolves,
pretty. Yeah, and the best part about it is because like when it resolves, now you have access to your whole yard. So if you had a pyroblast in there, if you had any sort of instant protection piece in there, even if someone tries to fight you post breach, you're going to be able to use that protection piece and then use it again. And then use it again. You know what I mean? So that's what makes breach so damn good is like if it sticks, you're pretty set. The only time you might get slightly hosed post breach, even if you have protection, is like if somehow an exile effect hits something that you want, like somehow a mind break trap resolves and then takes out something that you need. But other than that, you're sitting pretty.
yeah, can't say enough about good things about Breach. It's the core reason of playing Red, in my opinion, in this current state of the meta. So
100%. And you say it in your primer, and I actually, because of this, have echoed it in mine and quoted you. And that's that all roads lead to Underworld Breach. And I think that this is something that newer Korvold pilots need to get on the train of. Because I think that there's a lot of focus towards getting to food chain or getting to Witherbloom Chain of Smog. When in reality, a lot of the times we should be getting to Breach to then be able to do the other things that we want to do to win the game. And I think that breach scares a lot of new pilots specifically. So a question I wanted to ask you is how do we make breach more palatable as a win condition for newer Korvold players?
I like to use the term "kill your darlings," and this brings this. I'm going to piggyback off what you said because people are so focused on the well, how do I actually win the game? Like whether it be dual caster mage, food chain,
Yeah.
Praetor's grasp, and even Praetor's grasp is scary for some people because they still don't know how to really do it. People just always wonder,
Hmm.
like, "Oh, I have infinite Praetor's grasp and infinite mana. I don't know how to win. What if they have the One Ring?" But then you target the other players. But
Yeah.
the best way to do this is to play the card. Is basically strip it down to its basics. With
Mhm.
anything, when you're teaching somebody, whether it's a new workout technique, a new musical technique, whatever that may be in life, you have to be able to break it down into 3 simple steps. Remove all the other stuff. Practice the deck without all these handicaps in there that make things easier or
Mhm.
supposedly make things easier. Just play the breach. Get to that point. Play test with your friends, have manually go through the motions of practicing. And people always talk about, and I see this a lot with especially newer players in Discord, they talk about playing the deck versus actually sitting down and playing the deck. I can't tell
Yeah.
you how many countless hours I spent on learning things manually myself just to understand the ins and outs of does this actually work?
Yeah.
And once you kind of figure that out and you build this muscle memory of that, you kind of understand once I have access to breach, life's easy.
Yeah.
Life's easy, and when you do that with, especially in these types of decks, or whether it's Grixis or anything like that, you kind of understand. If you look at Blue Farm has Thassa's Oracle, and then it has sometimes Mnemonic Betrayal, potentially, depends
Yeah.
on their builds or not, and then Brain Freeze. That's it.
Yeah.
That's how they win the game. They have 2.5 win cons in their deck. And that's one of the best decks. So why do we need all these other win cons if we can do roughly the same thing? The deck that I had the most success on in tournament was a platinum event at Punt City 3.
Mhm.
And I played 2 main win conditions, and then I had some auxiliary stuff if things got hairy.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a real A plus B. My A plus B was Underworld Breach plus
Yeah.
Grinding Station.
Yeah.
That was it, and then I had a Technomancer loop. That was pretty much it right there, by and large. So,
And I think that when we're talking about breach, this is one of the times. So there's a lot of conversations. Eric, I know you're a huge fan of actually getting real games in, and not the biggest goldfishing fan. Which, for listeners, if you don't know what goldfishing is, you're on Mox Field. You're going to play test hands and just play out the game as you would expect the game to quote unquote play out. That being said, the game will never play out how you're goldfishing, but the one benefit that I will say goldfishing has is if you are not confident in your breach lines, you can create a board state that seems pretty reasonable and realistic to what you could possibly have when your underworld breach hits. And if you are not confident from winning from that position, practice via gold fishing. Because at that point, it's a mechanics thing. You have to get the mechanics to be able to know the cards in your list, be able to get to a game winning state once breach is down. I think that as a new Korvold player, I did this personally to help myself gain confidence in those breach lines. And because at that point, you're pretty protected. If breach lands, you could arguably say that there's not going to be a lot of interaction left over. And at that point, whatever you're gold fishing might play out similarly. I'm not sure if you agree on that, Eric, but I kind of see gold fishing as a way to help mechanics, not necessarily a way to see if your deck functions well.
yeah, I agree with that. And Moxfield is by far the greatest testing tool you could possibly have if you don't have access to a group of people
Mm-hmm.
or a very strong Discord community. I think Moxfield's a fantastic, and I myself will go through just, especially when I'm bored, I'll just kind of just pop up Moxfield and almost
Play
play like a
hands.
mini,
Yeah.
yeah, a mini sub game. And it just also getting the analytics off of Moxfield helps understanding like how many lands I need specifically or
Yeah.
mana considerations for cards like Ad Nauseum, those types of thing. But I think that right there, especially for a new player, it's just like there's no skin in the game. You can't worry about playtesting as you're not trying to win a playtesting game. You're trying to learn.
Yeah.
And everything about it is Your platinum events, those can be learning events, or your gold events, those could be learning events. But that's where you try to go win the game. That's where you
Mhm.
try to go, advance to that next level. Your playtesting, your bronze events, those types of thing. Your playtest with your friends. Put your ego aside. Be okay with making mistakes. Be okay with flubbing up, because I've definitely done it before early on. And trust me, I've been laying in bed at night
Shit, I
and
still do it now sometimes once in a while.
I go, no, I had that game won. Why didn't I just do this?
Yep.
And it happens.
Yeah, so use Moxfield as a tool. If you are scared of breach, Moxfield playtesting is your friend. Another helpful hint, if you're running Praetor's Grasp, steal a brain freeze and point it at yourself. If the storm counts high, now you won't be scared anymore. Now you're good to go.
Yeah, it'll make things easier.
I'm like, look, if you can find a way to fill your graveyard and you have 40 cards in your graveyard, it doesn't really matter how efficient you're going through your breach line. You're gonna get there. So that's a pro tip for all you new Korvold players there. All right, you want to move on to the next win condition, Eric, which is something we've talked about already, but I kind of want to dive into exactly what the combo looks like. So if you could explain what 6 loops look like in Korvold and how often you're going to use those in your list.
Well, first off, 6 loops are a thing of beauty. They might be one of my favorite new additions to the list, because I think what the 6 loops does, it takes pressure off of playing Grinding Station. Because if
Yep.
I had to ask in the dark, if you had to cast a card on turn 2 or even turn 3, would you rather cast Grinding Station without Breach, Grinding Station or 6? I'm casting the 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because 6 inherently especially on turn 1, Lord have mercy. On turn 2, 6 is this beautiful, and it's engine, card filtration,
Ramp.
ramp. It literally wears so many hats. It has so many benefits. It's green. It's easy to cast. It's a green and 2 colorless pips. It's a
Mm-hmm.
2/4, ultra hard to kill with Orcish Bowmaster, and it's legendary. So it just gets that little nice small synergy off the lighted halfling
Yep.
being an uncounterable engine, which is to me a big micro win for the list. And that's where I like to look at a lot of these cards as micro wins, but where we're at with 6. So 6 allows you to convert with Korvold on the battlefield specifically in a few different ways. If you have access to Life from the Loam and or Lion's Eye Diamond or Lotus Petal, you basically get to churn through your whole deck and put in the graveyard. Now, how does that look? Okay. So 6 allows you to discard a land to retrace a permanent on your turn from your graveyard. So we're going to obviously talk about Lion's Eye Diamond and Lotus Petal here. We'll go with Lion's Eye Diamond because I feel like it's pretty streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what Life from the Loam's at, as long as you have it or a land accessibility to it and Corvold's on the battlefield. So we'll just say I have access to Life from the Loam in the graveyard. I'm going to pitch a land to recast the LED. The LED is in play. Now I'm going to sacrifice the LED, discard my hand, and have a replacement trigger effect off the Dredge 3 off from the Life from the Loam. And I'm going to make 3 green mana off the Lion's Eye Diamond. That's going to put Life from the Loam back into my hand, and I'm going to get to mill 3 cards. So now
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to spend 2 green to cast the Life from the Loam, targeting up to 3 lands, returning them back to my hand, which allows me to basically repeat this loop. Very key on this, it gives you a +1 mana. So it
Mm-hmm.
allows you to pay through Rhystic Study if there is a singular Rhystic Study on the battlefield.
Yep.
Because you will get to a point to where you will see your Beseiju, and then you can then use the Beseiju to remove the Rhystic Study to continue, and then basically, not just draw cards, but actually have excess mana left over.
Yeah. And a lot of times how this loop ends, at least for me, is eventually you get to the point where you're then casting Underworld Breach. So then not only do you have access to all your permanents, but now you have access to all of your cards. So, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't see when it comes to the 6 loops. They're like, sure, you can get, access to your whole deck and you'll have some mana, but at what point, like, what happens? And for me, it's either ending by casting Underworld Breach, or sometimes it's ending if Underworld Breach is low in the pile and I'm actually playing it out and people don't just scoop. It's ending with a Ruthless Technomancer hitting my Korvold for 30 treasures, recast Korvold, and then have tons of mana, can access the rest of your deck. So that's kind of how I see the end of that loop play out before then casting your actual win conditions. But yeah, you did a great job explaining that loop. I think that being able to get Beseiju back from Life from the Loam, but still be able to continue the loop is a super big key. And you can do it multiple times too. So if there's multiple Rhystics on the board, just do it again. Because Boseiju is just going back to your graveyard. You just have to have the excess mana.
Yeah, and another thing about this loop that I don't think really people talk about a lot is that because it's a replacement effect, you're never drawing the card. So it's basically pro Smothering Tithe as well. Another card that's really prevalent in our format, the ability to combo through Restic and Smothering Tithe, while also just being a good quality card on its own. Speaking of Life from the Loam, it just, to me, it is our green brain freeze that actually gets to wear multiple hats.
Since we're here on this conversation, there is a small sect of Korvold pilots who prefer Dakmor Salvage to Life from the Loan for the dredge effect. I think you should listen to the last 5 minutes of this podcast and rethink why you think that way. Not only is it dredging for 3 instead of 2, which allows for more flexibility, but it's also just a good card to cast. Whereas Dakmor Salvage is a tapped land. What are your thoughts on the difference between those two? Since I know we're going to get a question about it.
A lot of games specifically break down to, if you are in that mid-range grind fest, that this is a card I will number one entomb for, because it allows me to fight on a different axis than typically Dakmor Salvage would allow me. Like, Dakmor Salvage doesn't do anything without 6. It's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yep.
It's like a grave crawler effect for your Warren Soul Trader
Yeah.
without the Warren
without
without Warren.
the Lord Soul Trader.
It,
100%.
I
100%.
don't. Life from the Loam is just a good Magic card, and if you've ever played 60 card formats, there's a reason why it was in the sideboard of the previous modern ban list system when they just banned Underworld Breach, because they would board into a Life from the Loam package to basically have access to their whole deck. So,
Yes, 100%. And
um,
another key to this is like if you're on any sort of land package, whether you're on the mini land package or a full lands build, just simply getting back a couple of fetch lands is insane. Like sometimes that is all you need to end up pushing yourself forward to win the game. If you have a Tireless Provisioner out, if you have a Nissa out, and now you're able to play a fetch land, that could be the difference between, being in a winning board state or being in a losing board state.
it smooths your draws, and that's something because in CDH we don't play a lot of cantrips unless they're very specific to the deck, like Brainstorm with Bola Citadel builds or something like that.
Sure.
But this is a card that allows you to smooth your draws, hit your land drops, and be very aggressive with your Mox Diamonds. Even in the lower land count builds, like the 26 that I previously used, I still found very good success with Life from the Loam. Just being able to be like land, Mox Diamond, pitch a land, cast something, play Life from the Loam, get my lands back, and then I start dredging. Now I just fuel my breach while also hitting my land drops.
Mm-hmm.
That's just something I don't think people talk about enough, is the ability to smooth out your draws and have kind of almost like a glue card. And I wouldn't be shocked if Life from the Loam is a little bit better than people just kind of overviewly like think about. Like they just think, oh, it's a lands card only. But in CDH, especially if the games are going a little bit longer and your deck doesn't have the ability to push, having access to multiple Besejus, Ottawaras, Emergent Zones, and I'm going to talk to you, Rog Thrasp. You might want to consider this card if it gets to the point where your deck gets so big where people are now having to run things to counter a cradle or destroy your cradle. Like if people are crop
Script
robbing
mine?
for script.
Yeah.
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 I mean, if we're getting to that point to where it's all roads lead to cradle for those decks and you need to stop your cradle, then having just something that gets it back. Also, those decks play most of those play Underworld Breach as well. So again, if they're on 6, Underworld Breach,
Yeah.
and being able to do those types of things, it's just another package that they get to run. I just think that card is quite good. And if your choice is between Life from the Loan and Dakmor Salvage, I normally try not to tell people that there is a correct answer. There is a correct answer here.
I don't think it's particularly close. I really don't.
No, run Life from the Loam. It's just a good card.
Yeah. And another note for Life of the Loam that can be really, awesome just in terms of like how our deck is built is like Korvold, generally speaking, and as long as I've been playing it, has been a reanimator, has at least had a reanimator sub theme to it. So if you're playing reanimate or you're playing animate dead or any of these spells, being able to simply dredge 3 and just fill your bin, now you're building synergy with another aspect of your deck that can be really powerful.
Yeah, if your draw for the turn it doesn't matter what it is. Like if you're just
Mm-hmm.
taking a naked draw in the dark, right? Would you rather have access to 3 utility lands, whether it be fetches or the cards that we've mentioned before, or just a blank generic piece of cardboard, I'd rather have the Life from the Loam at that point.
100%. And dredging for your draw for turn, I think is underrated. I think a lot
Very.
of new Korvold pilots won't make that choice because they might get caught up with the idea of like, oh, what if I draw the nuts? What if I draw the best card that I possibly need right now? When in reality, they could be sitting with a reanimate in their hand, and dredge for your draw for turn could be hot. Like that could be it. Like the difference between seeing 3 cards versus seeing 1 card can be huge, especially when that means you're getting Life from the Loam back to then use again. So can't talk about it enough more. And I think that you can't really talk about 6 without talking about Life from the Loam. So I know we were talking about 6 loops in general, but like this kind of went to a tangent of just talking about Life from the Loam. Banger card. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's move on to the next one condition, which is Praetor's Grasp. If you want to talk a little bit about how you use Praetor's Grasp in your build.
So Praetor's Grasp has 2 functions in my list. Number 1, I'm very aggressive with Praetor's Grasp early on. If I have the ability to cast the card I'm looking for afterwards, like if we're just talking about a setup card, I'm probably going to Praetor's Grasp for like a Rhystic Study, a Smothering Tithe, of something of that nature, depending on the pod. As long as I can deploy it within a reasonable amount of time. I've used it to steal Mystic Remora and a triple Rogside pod, actually at the Invitational, and it won me the game. It was
Hell
so
yeah.
insane. Turn 1,
They thought it was the Necro, but it was not. It was the Praetor's Grasp.
It was Dark Red into P Grasp, grab Remora, cast Remora, pass. 5 wheels were cast in between that time. By the time it ultimately came back to me, I had like 15 cards in my hand, and I just beat 3 Rogside decks with like little effort at all. That's where I'm going to be using it early on. I think of it as it's like how people play Grim Tutor and Rogside. You just can't be afraid to cast it. You can't hold it. You got to cast it, get value out of it, and then late game it's just kind of sitting in your graveyard, or you haven't drawn it yet, and then it's just basically the end of where you end with Underworld Breach if you need to that way. Like if you've milled your whole deck, you can just steal someone's Thassa's Oracle, win the game that way. It just basically, once the deck does the thing, it has infinite mana, its entire deck in its graveyard. If you can't win casting Praetor's Grasp,
what are you doing?
once, yeah,
What are you doing?
yeah, then you don't know A, how your deck functions, and B, you don't know how the format functions. And that might be for more advanced players. That's typically what they know. But for newer players, you need to learn your opponent's decks, because once you get past that fear, Praetor's Grasp just literally just becomes a great card.
Yeah.
It's just a 3-mana tutor. That's how you have to look at it. And it gets through Opposition Agent, which is very key.
Yeah. I have a question for you, and I want you to answer in full honesty, Eric, because sometimes people bring this up when it comes to Praetor's Grasp. If you Praetor's Grasp someone early, how often are you trying to deduce what's in the person's hand based on what you don't see in their deck?
I personally don't, unless it's a very specific list that needs a key card to function. Like if I
P-Grass a Kinnan, are you looking to see where Basalt Monolith is?
if I'm P-Grasping a Kinnan,
You're probably down bad, but
yeah, I try not to spend that much mental energy if I don't have to. Normally, if at that point, if I'm P-Grasping a Kinnan, I'm trying to get a card that's going to win me the game. That's the way I think about that. I'm probably not P-Grasping them for just generic
almost
value.
ever. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a bad example, but I just wanted to know, because to be honest, for me, it's something I think about all the time. And the second I have someone else's deck in my hand, I basically am only looking like if it's, because most of the time it's like a Dimir Plus deck that I'm P grasping.
Yeah.
I'm just looking to see whether or not they have Thassa's Demonic or Thassa's Tainted Pact, and if I need to be like afraid of the next turn. That's literally it. But other than that, I'm not like sitting there trying to, because some people I think try to, I don't know if they actually do it or if they're just trying to sound smarter than they actually are. If they're like, oh yeah, Praetor's Grasp is so good because you can deduce what the other person has. That seems like something that is not practical.
You can actually go back and watch a feature match of mine at Cowtown, and I don't know how we called the judge, but there was a Praetor's Grasp being cast, and they went through their deck for 15 minutes. Or the person they were starting, and I'm just like,
way.
I'm like, we have to take a game action. We have to take a game action, and it was all for like figuring out like
15 minutes.
It was so bad. I don't
know.
I don't want to
stop.
Yeah. It was so bad.
I'm glad that you answered honestly. There's no way. Like, don't do that, please.
Yeah, don't waste your first off, CDH is a very complex game as itself. Magic's already complex. Playing 3 other players basically at the same time,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother subset. And you're not just playing the game, you're dealing with politicking and yapping and all this other stuff that's going on. Try to conserve your mental energy as much as possible. Again, if it's like back in the day, whether it's like you're looking for the dockside in someone's
Hmm.
deck, that's completely different. Or the
Yeah.
Thassa's Oracle. That's easy
Yeah.
because those might be cards you would be stealing anyways. So
Yeah.
try not to waste your mental space on that and time efficiency, unless you're
Yeah.
just trying to
Like,
buy time,
yeah,
If you're trying to
true.
be this
What everyone's
scumbag,
not
then
saying. What everyone's not saying. Unless there's 2 minutes left in the round and you know you can't win. No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding. Oh my god.
play to
Yeah. If
draw
you're
right
sitting
there.
there, yeah, like if somebody P grasps and starts writing down the counter spells they see in the deck, I'm like, oh my god, please stop. Like, I will call time on you. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But Praetor's Grass, super versatile tool. The next one I want to review next WinCon is Dualcaster Twin Flame, which you're not currently on. To me, I see this as like a win of days past. Like this is something that I haven't been on personally in any versions of my list. And I will say I'm not. I play a ton of lands, but I also have other lists. Just like you have a lands list, and you probably don't play very much. But like I have a list for every Korvold iteration, even a really shitty KCI list. So Dualcaster Twin Flame is something to me that like I haven't been inclined to play in a really, really long time. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on Dualcaster Twin Flame?
I think it's an absolutely fine A plus B if that's what you need in your deck. Like if you feel that I need an A plus B that's comfortable, that I'm not worried about getting blown out too hard, like whether it's Witherbloom and Apprentice Chain of Smog, which that's a whole nother subject. I don't know why people think you just nakedly cast that combo.
That's
Like
insane. Yeah.
it's never been that way outside of like, okay, I know X spells have been used, X removal spells have been used. Everyone's ultra low in resources. They have like a 2% outer here to stop me. But Dualcaster Twin Flame, let's talk about its pros. It's comfortable and safe for people, right?
Hmm.
It's pretty compact if you want to believe that. It did get a mild upgrade and molten duplication.
Yep.
Just, if it allows you to have the theoretical possibility to win post combat with a Mayhem Devil out because the token sacrifice versus
Yep.
being exiled from the game. Um, Outside of that and being in 2-color decks that have access to that, like a Tali, which is just ultra streamlined with tons of red mana.
Yep.
There's the crux. We are not a red heavy deck anymore. It's the lowest tier of color amount that we have by a large margin. I do not want to dedicate, and this, I don't know why people don't understand this. 3 red is a lot to ask.
Oh, ton.
It's so much to ask. And now we're basically going, and this is where fundamental deck building comes in. This is the same way with food chain. You're not just an A plus B. It's an A plus B plus an outlet plus the other support, whether it's protection or the ability to remove cards like Ristic. So now I'm looking at a
Mhm.
5-6 card package. When I'm looking at Dualcaster Mage, it's super easy to go, okay, well, I want to be really consistent with it. So I need to run Twin Flame and Molten Duplication. Well, the format's largely based on clone effects. I might as well run Heap Shimmer. And now I'm over here running Saw in Half because I run Lightning Bolt and
Yeah.
OBM, so now I can win at instant speed
Yeah.
anyhow I want to. Oh, well, if that's the case, then if I'm winning in my M step, then I need Necromancy because it's an instant speed effect as well.
Yeah.
So I went from 2 cards to like 6 to 7, and not to mention the other crazy things you can do with Saw in Half and Ruthless Technomancer
Mhm.
and Deadpool and all this
Yeah.
wild stuff that you can do. So now we're basically moving away from what the deck's doing. We're
Yeah.
basically adding this other setup, and this isn't the deck that can abuse those effects the best.
I agree. Same as what you said. Like, I think that the dedication of red cards makes everything change. Like, now are you more inclined to play Jessica's Will? Now, are you in your land base? I guarantee it's set up to be Golgari with a splash of red. Are you going to have to change your land base and make your early mulligans where you're trying to deploy that green dork more difficult because you have to dedicate more into red? Like, there is a cascade of effects that you need to address before you're able to play that card successfully, even if you see it as a safety net. And also a pitfall, just while we're here, if you just take my list or Eric's list and swap out Witherbloom Apprentice Chain of Smog or swap out 2 cards and just plug in Dualcaster Twin Flame because you're like, I'm comfortable with that, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. And I think that it's not as simple of just being like swapping out one A plus B for another A plus B. So please think about these things before you know, think to yourself, "Oh, Eric said it's a safety net. I'm gonna play this safety net way," because you could be shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, and that's a very, very common pitfall that I've seen for not just Corvold, but most CDH decks. But luckily, most CDH decks have like just Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation, so
You don't have to
they
worry
just
about this
get to be
shit. Yeah.
they just get to be brain dead and just slot 3 cards in for that
Yeah.
with Taint Impact as well. So, but with our deck specifically, if you are, let's say, hypothetically in a Goblins build package where that deck is a Goblins tribal like
Sack goblins, draw cards. Yeah.
complete difference. But I don't know about you, but for me personally, I typically win most of my games post combat.
Yeah.
So now that card's much, much weaker. It's very much weaker at that point because now, like, well, I don't care about a bunch of infinite tokens unless
Hmm.
they. And then now I'm having to ask to have the Mayhem Devil out, or it has to be a Saw and Half combo to basically go for the Praetor's Grass line or copying Lightning Bolt or something like that's just too much to ask.
Yeah.
Keeping things simple and clean because a lot of games end up with me attacking with 6, accruing a setup of value, and then figuring
Yeah.
out because I want to see the most cards possible. So if I have a 6 in play,
Or Korvold. Yeah.
exactly.
Why would we give up milling three, getting a land back through six, or give up seeing an extra card before we decide to make our decision on how we're going to play the rest of our turn? If we're
Yeah.
trying to jam pre-combat, like we're missing out on a ton of information and a ton of resources.
And spoiler alert, Dockside Extortionist is banned. So those clone effects aren't good like how clone effects in other decks are good. Those clone effects like Mockingbird and
Yeah.
Phyrexian Metamorph, those cards are very good. Like Twin Flame,
Yeah.
just by itself
Mid.
is not is
Mid. Yeah.
mid is being very fair on that one. At least Heat Shimmer can target anything. I'll give
Anything.
Heat
Yeah.
Shimmer anything.
Yeah.
So
It's a little more
yeah,
flexible.
clone effects, those types of things, guys and gals. I just wouldn't worry about trying to force that. If I had to give you my honest opinion, and this is again, we talk about how decks are built. Deck
Mhm.
building is essential key. If I could suggest anything to anybody, learn how 60 card decks are built, apply a lot of that skill, like learn from the best people. Don't learn from us, learn from Reed Duke, learn from Pat Chapin, Michael Flores, the goats of the day of deck building philosophy. And I was very fortunate growing up with basically all the OGs. I've been playing Magic since 98. So deck building philosophy really matters. And once you
Mhm.
understand deck building philosophy, then you actually understand deck building choices. So just slotting a triple pip 5 mana combo that doesn't really align with your game plan into your deck,
What are you doing?
yeah, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
What are you doing? Yeah. And that's something that, look, another benefit of looking at like 60 card strategies and deck building strategies, especially when it comes to land bases, is like there's been way more time to tune those general fundamentals in one-on-one formats than there has been in EDH and CEDH, right? It's like there is so much knowledge that you can find because there has been so much more time to develop. And I'm not trying to discount the people who have been playing CEDH since EDH was made and they're like those like archaic truthers of like I've been playing CEDH for longer than anyone else. That's great, but like were you digging into the same levels that a 60 card pro was digging into? Probably not. All right. Do you want to move on from Dualcaster Twin Flame? Get on to the next one.
Absolutely.
All right. So the next one we have here is Infinite Treasure Generation. So whether that's through Technomancer or some other spicy combos, right now your deck, just looking at it right now, you have a couple of options. So why don't you go ahead and talk about Infinite Treasure Generation?
So we have basically a form of I would loosely say infinite treasure generation in Warren Soul Trader Chatterfang.
Yeah.
Um, that's going to basically be per life. You're going to be able to make a treasure, but if Corvold's out, you're going to be able to draw a card. That's going to largely get you there no matter what. I don't think I don't think it's possible to lose a game if you draw.
Draw 60, make 20 mana. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's there. And again, you notice there's not a true outlet in the list for that because I just don't think that there's an outlet that's quite good enough to put into my deck right now where
Yeah.
I would need it.
And you're kind of talking about like a Blood Artist effect, right? Because I've
Yeah,
seen a lot of Korvold lists that run Warren, Soul Trader, Chatterfang, and then Blood Artist. Because what that does, listeners, is that it makes it so that the combo is determinate. Because every time that you're going to be sacking a squirrel to make a treasure, you're also going to be dealing one damage to all, or making your opponents lose one life. Let me correct that. There's a difference. And effectively draining the table. So it just makes it end right then and there when it happens. Um, but what Eric's talking about is we're neither of us are including those types of effects in our list, even though we are running the Warren Soul Trader and Chatterfang.
yeah. It would have to be like if they made you know the card Prosperous Innkeeper, the one that it's like an
Looking it
Essence
up.
Warden. It's an Essence Warden effect. It's a green and a colorless. It's a 1/1, and it enters the battlefield and makes a treasure. But whenever a creature enters, you gain 1 life. If that was a black green effect where it was like a black green, a 2/2, and it had the like Blood Artist and that effect, that's a completely different card. Also,
Yeah.
if it makes a treasure, I'm probably in on a 2 mana 2/2 that makes a treasure. It's also my Wink edition.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wouldn't
little
that be
little
nice?
bit, yeah. Which brings me to like there's not a green black like true Blood Artist effect, which is really wild to me. Like,
Yeah, it is interesting. Maybe not a loss of life one, but you'd think that there would be a damage one in red for sure.
but that's a whole nother subject. So where we're looking at this is again, we're gonna bring 6 back into this because this is why 6 is so
Hell
good.
yeah.
6 is the natural process of playing the game because you're trying to develop the 6. Though, so the 6 is typically on the battlefield because it's unless people really are in the know about 6, it's people kind of ignore it. It's kind of like a professional face breaker at that point in most
Yeah.
people's eyes.
Yeah.
Um, if I get to have, let's say, and this is we're going to say completely unprotected, just so that way we're not getting into the nuances of needing to hold up like Veil of Summer Mana or something like that. If a Korvold, let's say, is like a 9/9 or a 10/10, and I get to play like a Ruthless Technomancer to cash in on that Korvold, I'm going to get to eat the Korvold, draw a card, and then ideally, I'm going to discard a land to recast the Korvold out of the graveyard for
Hmm.
5 mana total.
Hmm.
You still have your failsafe of the Ruthless Technomancer of sacrificing 7, basically 3 treasures for mana and 4 of the artifacts to recur the Korvold back on the battlefield. But at that point, what you're going to do is you're going to see a velocity of cards that's going to be really hard pressed to miss, especially in myself and Kyle's list, a higher land count because I'm on 29, he's on 32, which is
Hmm.
way higher than typically most Corvold lists out there. Uh, Also, any tutor or Life from the Loam or something like
Yeah.
that just makes this like a brain dead combo. It's super easy. And you're going to basically get to recast, crack your treasures, and loop through. So basically, it's a way to quote generate infinite mana to again get to your endpoint of Underworld Breach. And it's not inherently infinite, but you're getting to a point to where you have such a critical mass of mana and treasures and cards in your hand that you're going to outscale anything that they could possibly have at that point.
Yeah. I see it as a very similar effect is like using Ruthless Technomancer, even if you get it for like a Ruthless Technomancer for 20 is the same thing as a Warren Chatterfang combo. It's like you're getting so much card draw and mana that at that point you seem insurmountable.
Yeah. And then another combo that's in the list and is actually in Kyle's list. I'd like for you to actually speak on this if you don't mind.
Sure.
But can you tell them about when you start your Aftermath Analyst combo loop with Shifting Woodlands? What happens when
Mhm.
you have like Tireless Provisioner in play?
Yeah. Oh, way to throw up the alley oop for me, Eric. I wonder what happens when you have Tyler's Provisioner. So Tyler's Provisioner is obviously in Eric's list, and it's something that provides a landfall trigger that is going to give you a treasure every time a land comes into play. So if we have Squander Resources, Aftermath Analyst, a Shifting Woodland into play, or in play, or in the bin, doesn't really matter, and we have the ability to activate the Aftermath Analyst, what we're going to be able to do is loop sacrifices on your lands and then pulling back all of your lands by making Shifting Woodlands activate to turn into an Aftermath Analyst and then sack again. So we're using the awesome Delirium ability of Shifting Woodlands to turn it into an Aftermath Analyst and let it sack to pull back itself. Because once it's dead, it's going to be a land again, and it's going to be pulled back by its own ability. So, or the ability of the thing that it turned into, because it's a shifting woodland. But if you do that while you have Tireless Provisioner in play, you can add in infinite treasures. So if you can do that over and over again, you will have infinite treasures. You can then cast Korvold. If you have Korvold out, You got to be a little careful while you're doing this and just go to a certain point and then end up killing your Korvold with one of the many tools that we have to kill our Korvold, or just go as far as you need to go. And at that point, if your opponents haven't conceded when you're demonstrating that you can draw your whole deck, then I don't know. If they're making you play it out, then whatever.
If they're making me play it out, I'm very grateful because most people just concede at that point. So
Yeah.
I actually get to enjoy doing the thing. Like
You're
I
like, oh,
never
you
get
want to
to
watch me
like
play
do
solitaire for 40 minutes? No, I'm
sweet.
just kidding. Oh, you want to watch me individually do my add a 1/1 counter to my Corvold and draw a card? Okay.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. But that combo is really cool because you end with a bunch of treasures. If you're playing Mayhem Devil, it's an easy outlet. I think currently you're not, correct?
I am not.
But here's a very fun thing that you can do. An outlet that we have in the list that Eric and I have talked about and both of us run is once you have infinite treasures, you have a really cool outlet via Ruthless Technomancer, Chatterfang, and Orcish Bowmaster. So what you can do when you have infinite treasures and infinite, like access to your deck is obviously you do this without Corvold on the field so that you don't deck yourself. But you can cast an Orcish Bowmaster, ping somebody. You can then use Chatterfang's ability to sacrifice itself, kill your own Orcish Bowmaster, then use Technomancer's ability to pull back both Chatterfang and Orcish Bowmaster to ping the table and do it again. So it gives you this nice little way of pinging down the table using cards that are inherently super powerful by themselves. And it gives us a reason to not run just a raw Mayhem Devil, right? Just a really cool way to ping down the table if you don't really know how to win. That being said, Eric's list runs Praetor's Grasp, but you can also just like cast Praetor's Grasp and kill somebody. So you really have many different ways to kill the table once you have infinite treasures. So that shouldn't really be a worry. But I kind of wanted to talk about that combo a little bit as a worst case scenario.
And honestly, a lot of times once I get into the aftermath analyst loops, that's pretty much how I end the game. Like when people see that, I just explain to what I'm doing and they're like, "Oh, wow, that's really cool." And I kind of gave that a little as an Easter egg early on about Chatterfang. Chatterfang to me has replaced what Mayhem Devil was to the original list pre-ban.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why Mayhem Devil was good pre-ban was it was the finisher and it was a sack outlet for dockside extortionist. So it served two roles.
3 rolls if you throw in controlling the board for other people's docksides.
Sure. And so now Mayhem Devil doesn't really do that. It's not part of the combo. It's just there to kind of pew pew off some things and then as well as being a finisher. Here, Chatterfang literally basically does all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Chatterfang, when I was speaking earlier, it, it it's like the unsung hero of all these lists. Like people just think it's the A plus B to Warren Soul Trader. In reality, Chatterfang, by the way, produces a ton of squirrels through this whole loop because once you have the Ruthless Technomancer on the battlefield and you're going through your combo with Aftermath Analyst and everything, you have access to every creature in your entire deck into play.
Mm-hmm.
And you're making treasures on top of with everything with Talent Provisioner, which makes more squirrels. So you have infinite squirrels.
Yeah.
So like my list specifically, I run Finale Devastation. And so I can just kill people with combat if I really had to, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. With infinite squirrels.
Or I can't think of the scenario, but if there was like pieces that were preventing me from winning for some reason, even though I've already initiated this loop, I can just Chatterfang them all away because I have infinite squirrels. So
Yeah.
that's why this list, and you don't need everything into play or in your hand because once you start the loop, you'll gradually start gaining access. It's just like I was saying earlier, it's dredge. Don't worry about what's in your hand. Start your loop. You'll have access to your whole deck. Once you have access to your whole deck, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter how you win, as long as you've built your deck in a way that has a win. I will take this time since we're talking about Chatterfang. Do you mind clearing up for people? I have seen some people not understand how Chatterfang's ability works with Korvold triggers. Do you mind explaining how many cards you draw based on how many squirrels you're killing?
So let's take. I'm going to remove Warren Soul Trader out of the equation just because that's like always super easy, right? Like that's just one of those things. A common play pattern for this deck that I like is I think it's the best draw engine in our colors. That's a true like grind value draw engine is Black Market Connections. It literally does everything that we want. It draws cards, makes treasures, and makes material that happens to be a squirrel as well because it's a changeling. But when you're getting to do the thing, so let's say you don't have like a really inherently like crazy board and you're just kind of got a Chatterfang, a Korvold that's like, been grinding and eating some cards up, like an
Hmm.
8899, something like that. And I get to play Ruthless Technomancer. So I play the Ruthless Technomancer, I eat the Korvold, I make X treasures equal to its power. So we'll say 9. Those treasures will come into play. Chatterfang sees that. So now I get to make 9 squirrels or more, whatever it happens to be. So that is when I bring Corvold back with the Technomancer ability, I get to basically pay 1 black, sack X squirrels, smoke something, and draw that many cards. So
Yep.
Chatterfang basically becomes like, imagine a dismember. Instead of paying life, you're drawing cards. Like if you go, I'm going to dismember, pay 4, draw 4 cards, give something -4, -4. It is plus X minus X, but in reality, it's just
It
to kill
doesn't
the
matter.
creature.
Yeah, it's just a
Yeah,
kill spell. And what I see people not realizing is the key there is Corvold sees all the number of squirrels that you are sacrificing. It's not just
yeah.
one effect. Corvold is going to see all of them. So however many squirrels you can sack is how many cards you're drawing off Corvold and making Corvold larger with. So I think that's a key point that a lot of newer pilots don't necessarily realize is like, oh shoot, you can sacrifice squirrel, like one squirrel equals one card draw? That's insane.
Which allows us to, when we're talking about the 6 Ruthless Technomancer loop, if you have the Chatterfang out, you've got it. I've
Yeah.
never lost once you have it, because once you go through that first iteration of loop, it doesn't matter if Corvold was like an 8/8 or whatever. Once you bring him back, you have all those squirrels plus, let's say, uh 3 to 5 extra treasures, not to mention anything else you have on the battlefield mana wise.
Yeah.
Then you get to go, all right, I'm going to pay 1 black, sack, and you could kill multiple things too. It doesn't just have to be like one thing. You could pay a black here, sack 3 squirrels
Yep.
here, pay a black here, kill your Oppo, kill your Dranith, whatever.
Hmm.
You've got it. And that's another thing. Chatterfang is removal. It's a combo piece, and it's just a material piece too. Like, I mean, just like so many times when you just have kind of a poopy hand and you've had a mulligan low, if you get to go like from Ragavan into Chatterfang into Corvold, you literally have a tiny engine going on there
Hmm.
that, you wouldn't really think about, but that helps you remove certain pieces early and not fall back behind. Because how many cards do you need to draw to get really back into the game? Not many.
Sweet. All right. Now we're moving into the big two, which are two key pillars of this deck, Necropotence and Ad Nauseam. So I think if you're a CEDH player, this is the part of the deck that you probably understand the best in knowing the power of these cards. So we don't have to spend too much time on them. But if you want to just talk a little bit about your game plan when it comes to Necropotence or Ad Nauseam, kind of giving some tips and tricks for using these as vehicles to win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, For Necropotence specifically, I like to utilize, this is a very intuitive card to me. You have
Hmm.
to really understand the complexities of the game state and what your position you're in the game state and what your deck can and cannot do. Once you understand what your deck is capable of, then you can understand how to best maximize Necropotence. Necropotence is a very scary card for a lot of people because of how it triggers everybody's always super scared of the exile effect. Um, you could do some really cool stuff with the exile trigger of Necropotence on the stack in the graveyard,
Hmm.
and you're starting to aftermath analyst loop, which is super cracked, by the way.
Yeah.
Once you like go to discard, put all the triggers on the stack, and just loop and kill them at instant speed. For the player who's trying to figure out, especially with me having a lands package in here, we were always the dockside deck, so
Hmm.
the thought of dockside getting exile was always super scary for whatever reason. But
Yeah.
you have to look at Necropotence as a way to refill your hand. It's one of the cards that allows you to mulligan really low. Sometimes if I know if I'm mulligan, I'm just not seeing the pieces. I still always have a shot, even at a mull to 3. I can have Dark Ritual, land, Necro.
Yep.
Ask Rogside pilots; they do it way too often with that.
Yeah.
Way too often. It's like
Yeah.
magic for their deck, but it just allows you to basically play it, draw to kind of really refill your hand. If you feel like you want to get a little bit far ahead, I like to always draw up to what's 2 hands worth, so about 14 total cards. So if I have 3
Yeah.
cards in my hand, I'll pay 11 into it and put 11 into my hand, so I have 14. Keep the best 7. Or if I just happen to be in that point where I have already access to an emergent zone and I have the resources, it's not just I have the E zone, I got to have mana available. And that's where cards like 6 and stuff really just smooth things out. And being in a post dockside world, it's harder to do that. I think I do that maybe sub 20% of the time. Most of the
Yeah.
time, Necropotence is just there to refill my hand and just give me maybe that burst of 10 to 15 cards for that final push.
The other thing I would mention would be like if you have the E zone in hand or if you have Final Fortune in hand, right? Those are
Yeah,
the two times that when I'm playing a Necro based Korvold build, like I'm looking specifically for Crop Rod into E zone or Final Fortune in hand and the ability to cast it, right? If you
yeah,
don't have those things, do not, in my opinion, Necro crazy deep. Just use it as a tool to set yourself up.
yeah. I mean, that's the best way to play that card. And honestly, playtest with it. Kind of experiment. Find out what works best. If it's a local meta, play within your local meta that way. Figure out what's going on. If it's the big tournaments and stuff like that, take that experience and apply it to there. Again, there's certain decks that if they're blue, they have way better tools at abusing Necropotence than we do. But still, Emergent Zone being a very powerful land on its own, and Final Fortune basically being one of the best rituals of all time.
And the only answer to Silence and Jund.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not playing to Bolt's Trickery. I
No,
can't.
no, 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 no. Yeah.
The Japanese meta, I'll let them have that card. They could totally
No
claim that.
shot. I'm playing that. Yeah.
But yeah, Necro is just a really good tool. And again, you don't have to play it. My build is specifically playing that because of the ability to generate so much mana through various avenues, whether it's the normal rituals, mana dorks, and I like to call them the LNT package, which is Lotus Cobra, Nissa, and Tireless Provisioner,
Mm.
and a little small E for Elvish Spirit Guide because he's a part of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But and again, that just like Nissa being able to get into that Elvish Spirit Guide over everything, honestly, that makes your Necro lines pretty nice. But yeah, that's what I would suggest for Necro. It's one of those cards that you have to play it instead of talking about it, and
Yeah.
then just learn from it and writing things down or typing things up, whatever how you want to do it. I'll be 40 this year, so I'm still a writer at heart. So I would do that, record your data on it, learn your pitfalls, learn your pivot points, learn your pressure points. Oh, I need X amount of mana to execute this line in this
Mm-hmm.
position. Also, understanding how to abuse Necro with the triggers on the stack with something like Shifting Woodlands, those types of things.
Yep.
Once you can abuse your Necro triggers and you can still play with them, then the card becomes way more appealing.
That is the key to that. And it's the same way that, it's one of the reasons what I miss, and I don't see it very often, is like my current list is missing the ability to create a trigger and clean up. As far as I'm aware, somebody can tell me otherwise, but I'm not running Necromancy and I'm not running Necropotence. So if I don't have that ability, Angel's Grace just stuffs me. like like I don't have the ability to be able to create a trigger and clean up and then play around the Angel's Grace like I used to. And that isn't super relevant, but it's something that I want to bring up in case you play against that often. Because I would say that there's probably two decks in the format that do play Angel's Grace right now, at least more consistently, but it's something to think about. Same with Silence.
Same with Silence as well. It's one of the, again, very micro ways to maneuver around that type of effect. For me, that's all I really want to say about Necro. Just for people, if you're a more of an advanced player, then you probably don't need anything else on it. Then you're probably just playing Rogsai.
Yeah, true. If you're a more advanced, but you're playing a better Necro deck.
Yeah, you're playing the better Necro deck
Yeah,
with blue cards,
but
but
yeah, I think we definitely I at least we view it the way we talked about it, all roads lead to breach. We're more of a breach deck than we are a necro deck, but we play necro because it's so damn good. It's like at least you play necro in your list because it's so damn good. I can talk a little bit later about why I'm not on it, but let's move on to Nas and how ad nauseum, plays a role in your list.
when I decided to stick with Nas, it wasn't just it was part of it was stubbornness, but B, Nas is still just a very, very powerful effect. Like we all know what ad nauseum does. If you don't, it's going to be on the screen.
Yep.
The issue with Nas is when the bans happen, it wasn't just the speed of Nas went down, the overall CMC value of the decks went up.
Yep.
Because they have to compensate for the missing cards, whether they're now playing things like the One Ring, and decks actually shifted to playing Smothering Tithe because now Smothering Tithe is relevant with the speed, because before, when it was the Rogsai meta, the speed was just super, super fast.
Yeah.
So Smothering Tithe, didn't really like play into Necro, Nas, or those types of effects. Now, I started doing some tournament data pull,
Mm-hmm.
like Blue Farm, for example. The overall like worst performance of Blue Farms are playing Nas, but the ones that are winning are playing Nas. So There's
Yeah.
like a weird dichotomy in that data. So data is you have to be able to look at the data and parse the data and go, well, blue you can't play blue farm or say blue farm because we're not blue farm. Blue farm's
No.
floor is just inherently higher than us, but their ceiling is just a really good mid-range deck. I mean, that's what they are. They're a very good mid-range deck with Thassa's Oracle like backup.
Yep.
And when we look at Nas, it's like, well, how do we break Nas in our list? Well, it's really simple. Explosivity, protection, and the ability to convert those resources into a win. You know, if you see Blue Farm, they may not always be able to convert a NOS because they're so clunky. Like when you're hitting like 4-drop creatures or 3-drop creatures, like
Yeah,
opposition
Phyrexia and
agent,
Metamorph and like yeah, just a bunch of random stuff that they play for value. Even like the Delny or something like that.
yeah, a bunch of counter spells, which are great for protecting, but they don't convert into a win. When you get the Nas in a deck, like let's say mine or even Kyle's for that matter, when you got 1.1x whatever CMC or CMV for people, that's a lot of cards. And especially when the lands typically produce way more mana than you think, because we're running
Hmm.
things like six. If you get access to six and Lotus Petal post Nas,
It's easy.
I almost want to put these like rules to play non-blue or rules to play like green Nas decks post ban, and I think it all revolves around six because I think six converts to your Nas so much better than Bergie does because Bergie again you still have to have the mana to get the Bergie going. Six just says, hey, I just have to have access to things like Lotus Petal, an Entomb, whatever that may be. So when you look at the deck, typically Nas is really hard to win. But when you get to play things like Land Dork Go, just very classic, very simple, safe play, and then you get to go land into either it's Nissa, Taos Provision, or Lotus Cobra. Your turn three is so gross. It's so gross. And that right there to me is what this deck, this build, this whole thesis of this deck is. It is a turn three Nas with protection and mana left over because of those types of
Hmm.
cards. And that's something that really no other deck can do. Rogside can do it with protection. They may
Hmm.
not have as much mana left over.
But they don't need
Um,
it. It's just the build. The build is created where
yeah,
they don't need that extra mana, but they'll have the protection
they'll
through
have the protection.
free protection. Yeah.
But if you look at the rest of the format, not a lot of decks get to effectively truly abuse Nas. Those cards make things so much easier. And that's what allows me to play cards like Defense Grid. So
Yeah.
typically, Defense Grid is a little bit is worse in other decks than it used to be because there's so many. I don't even want to say Seedborn Muse decks anymore because Seedborn Muse is like now they're just Cradle decks, right?
Yeah, they
So
are. Yeah.
they're just like full blown Cradle abuse decks. But those decks typically try to develop or go off, and they get stopped, and then they try to go off again. But that turn three is to me the critical juncture of the list. Is that turn three with protection, whether it's Dosen, Defense Grid, Vexing Bauble, those types of cards that allow you to basically push a Nas and not really you didn't really like waste a bunch of resources.
Hmm.
You're not having to cast a bunch of rituals. You get to just playing a fetch land, which is a natural state of progressing your board state.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're potentially getting more value off of it, especially if it's like Nissa or even Tireless Provisioner. So that's where the Nas really function. Nas puts pressure on the game that typically people don't think that still exist outside of the Boogeyman or something like a Rockside list.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this deck can really surprise people because Nas is obviously super scary in pre-ban meta, but in post-ban meta, it's not as scary.
No, a lot of people think it's weak, or at least it's
Exactly.
the weakest as it's been. So I'm glad that we get to still utilize that. Since you brought up D grid, I kind of want to transition. I think we kind of covered the majority of our win conditions now.
Hmm.
I want to transition into protection interaction. You mentioned defense grid. It's something that I don't run. Why don't you talk a little bit about the protection suite that you currently have in your list? You can talk about defense grid a little bit more if you want, but besides defense grid, what else are you using, whether it's interaction or protection to protect these win cons?
So there's a few different ways that I look at it. I'm gonna say just like the overall generic protection is Dosen. I think Dosen is one of my favorite cards.
I
I
love
don't
that
know
card.
why it's so bad compared to every other Grand Abolisher effect. With that being said, It's so good in this deck in these colors. And even I see blue decks run it like a Sultai list. They run Dosin, which
Yeah.
they do. So they get Dosin plus like counter spells, which is really nice.
Lucky.
Yeah. But Dosin is just such a great card in this list. It's naturally progressive. First off, it's green, right? So we get to get it with Green Sun Zenith, and we get to get it with Summoner's Pact. Shout out to those two cards. Those cards are way underplayed in our meta as a whole. But Dosin just allows you to basically confidently combo through Rhystic if you really need to. And at that point, Dosin effectively is a valve, and it basically shuts things down. So now you only got a slow drip of things that can come through. So at that point, what are you really worried about? Maybe it's Beseju. War is starting to get cut, or War, that card's getting cut even more and
Yeah.
more every day because it's not really that good in the decks now. In like Rogthras, they can totally abuse it. But outside
Yeah.
of the big mana decks like Blue Farm, they're getting more greedy. They're playing or more. They're playing like Mistrise Village, or they're wanting
Hmm.
to include different lands. So that card's starting to come out.
Yeah.
But what Dosin does, it basically narrows your focus point to what do I actually lose to at this point, or what can I lose to? And then once you assess that, then you go, oh, they don't have the mana for it, even with the Spirit Guide. Okay, cool, do my thing.
Let's dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah,
Once you're under Dosin, an easy thing to think about is like, I don't think that there is a played CEDH staple that our deflecting SWAT doesn't protect against. So like
correct.
deflecting SWAT becomes incredibly potent once Dosin is down. And it's one of the first things I generally tutor for when I have access to a big chunk of my deck and I know that I'm in a game-winning state and I have Dosin down. It's like if you have deflecting SWAT and Dosin down, you are safe. Like unless multiple players have the channel effects, which the ones we're worried about, you mentioned Beseju, somewhat worried about a 4 mana Talon Gates, I guess, but you would be well aware that someone has 4 mana available.
Hmm.
Otawara, and then something that I see in a lot of my meta, but I don't know if you see it, is Touch of Spirit Realm.
Yeah,
That's another one that can be really annoying. You also see a little bit a sprinkling of like Colossal Sky Turtle. We don't really care too much about that though, because it just goes like back to hand and we can just replay it a lot of the times. Um, is there anything else? Maybe if you're playing against Magda, there's the sniper that deals 2 damage. That's
yeah,
like it, right?
that's about it.
That's about it. We're not seeing any more Stratus Dancer, right?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there was that Sultai morph deck that was like doing well
Kadena,
in an
yeah,
event.
I
Yeah.
built that. It's ass. Don't play it. No offense to that
Oh,
pilot, but yeah, I think Dosen is just super super cool. We also have a lot of X or less tutors to board that you can kind of get fancy with Dosen with, right? So you can go to
yeah.
4 or go to 5 and then just pull Dosen, right? And a lot of times pilots won't see that coming. And if you have that excess mana, like I've done a green sense for X equals 6 with people being like, oh, this is going to be Lumra, and be like, oh, there's not a lot of lands in play, and that's just a Dosen. You know what I mean? It's like, cool. It's like when you're able to have the X or less tutors, you can get tricky with how you're getting Dosen into play, thankfully, because it's a green creature.
Again, it's legendary. So again, it gets to come into play uncounterable off Delighted Halfling. And
Yep.
it's those micro synergies that really, I think, enhance this deck's playability that you don't really think about. Like, and that to me is a win. I love getting micro synergies out of cards. It's always nice when cards fit multiple roles outside
Mm-hmm.
of what they're inherently intended to do. In terms of other protection, I play both Veils because I'm a
Yeah.
Nanausium deck, so I'm trying to push a Nanausium or Necropotence through, or a spell that is inherently trying to win me the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the ability to also protect the life from the loam, I think is really quite nice. Also, just that the fact that we're seeing more, I would say even just pure removal. I would just say more bounce. I'm seeing every blue deck
Yeah.
runs into the
Flaw
flood
and
ball.
Floodmaw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that card is great. I don't understand how blue gets that card, but whatever.
I mean, to be fair, it is a blue effect. Like it's a bounce spell. Blue should get that, but should it be 1 mana? I don't know. It should have hit
Uh,
everything if you give someone a 1/1. You know.
yeah, like not even draw a card. It's like here, have a 1/1 dork. You
Yeah,
know,
have something
like
you don't care about. Yeah,
oh
that is something that differs between our lists. I'm not on Autumn's Veil currently. Veil Summer is an MVP and super powerful, and
yeah.
a lot of times replaces itself, which is sweet. The other thing that I kind of want to talk about on your list is Vexing Bauble. So how does that kind of fit in terms of protection?
So Vexing Bottle is very interesting. You look at it, it's really weird. If it was a sorcery that was like one colorless did the exact same thing, I would be like, oh yeah, that's an auto include. But for whatever reason, Vexing Bottle came in and out of the list because it doesn't allow you to combo with like your Lotus Petals and
Yep.
your Lion's Eye Diamonds,
Or Summer's
because
Pact. Yeah.
Summoner's Pact. But what I like is obviously it's Bodal. You can sacrifice it. Sometimes I'll just play it, prevent Rogthras or Rogdex from developing, as long as I have mana open and I'm not just going to get blown out by some random Dimir deck that's just going to Thassa's combo.
Yeah.
But what it does do, it's a really interesting lead piece. When you are in that situation where you're trying to go for it and develop a mana, it's a great card to basically stress test your opponents.
Yep.
It's 1 mana. It's super easy. It comes off colorless, whether it's an excess mana off of Grim Monolith, Mana Vaults, City of Traders, those types of things.
Yeah.
And so if it resolves, then I can deploy the Dosin and go for it. And then
Yeah.
just get rid of the Vexing Bauble
And then get rid of the Vexing Ball. Yeah.
Yeah, and draw 2 cards off of it. It's just a really good flexible piece in that regard. Another thing too that I love to do, and shout out to, before Legacy got butchered by the bans list, I love going Vexing Bauble and then casting a Veil of Summer. So now I get to just cast all my zeros because they can't be countered.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hot.
It's really nice because some people let the Vexing Bauble resolve because they're like, well, he can't do his 0 mana artifact rocks thing. Also, I'm not a grinding station deck, so it's not nearly as important anymore. It still
Yeah.
allows me to kind of go through it. And sometimes if I just want to protect the more robust combos, Vexing Bauble just allows me to do that. Whether it's like War and Soul Trader combo or Aftermath Analyst or even 6 of that matter.
Yeah.
Like with looping the Technomancer type of stuff. Vexing Bauble doesn't care about any of those, so it just allows me to do that. Again, it's just 1 mana. It's a super simple piece. I don't think it's necessary. I wish we had another type of card that was that cheap. Which is why I don't run City of Solitude, which again,
Yeah.
it's a powerful effect on its own.
Also an
But
enchantment. Yeah.
and I don't want to run so many of the things that punish me. Like you have to have, there's a critical mass. Once you go from like Dosin, defense grid, that's about all I want to run that can punish me,
Mhm.
or that's not just Grand Abolisher, Voice of Victory, Ranger Captain, those kind of cards that are just very, very good as
Yeah.
just base level cards. So
Yeah. And then since we're on this, there is we wanted to talk a little bit about some spice that we like and like cards that are like fringe in the list. And sometimes they're in, sometimes they're out. And, 2 of these cards kind of fall under the protection category sometimes. The first one I want to bring up is Guttural Response. So Monkey with Sword, as I like to call him. Because in that printing, the list printing, the non-foil, so I know you don't run it probably, but I personally run the Monkey with Sword, and I think it's an incredible card solely for that purpose.
well, I really like that card for its flexibility. When I was on a very, very just all in turbo list, pre-ban, I thought that card was quite good, mostly just because it stopped Mindbreak Trap. And that's really where it fell into. It was the ability to stop Mindbreak Trap. Now it stops like obviously any counter spell, but it was always Mindbreak Trap was the one that was kind of the most crucial. Now it to be able to go 1 red or green flexibility to just stop like an overloaded Cyclonic Rift is really nice.
Yeah.
Especially if you're on the more I'm trying to develop out my board state in that mid game or the ability to push later. I think it's a great card if you have the flexibility slot. For me personally, in that slot, I'm running LQR, Legolas's Quick Reflexes, and I think you are too as well, right?
I am. That card's a banger. I think if you're
Yeah.
on Wither Chain, you have to be on that card because it's one of the best protection pieces for your Witherbloom Apprentice, and you can fire it off before you commit to a Chain of Smog. It's so good.
Yeah, and I think anything that's got a creature combo centric to it, or you're very combo commander centric, I think that card's just kind of like
It's nuts.
it's nuts. It's a removal spell too, effectively, right? Like you get to like just target your Korvold, swing, kill the thing that's preventing you from winning.
So good. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good card. We did a podcast on that one, so that's a good card. The next one that you kind of brought up as your spice that you like a lot is Flare of Duplication. So why don't you talk a little bit about that card?
Flare duplication, we're Jund. We're always starving for high quality interaction or protection spells. And the rich keep getting richer when it's like ROG based decks. They just get a card that's just I think they printed that card literally and they go, man, ROG decks just don't have enough help. We got to give them this card, right?
Roger needs to be stronger. We got to print the Final Fantasy Roger art. We need him to feel good.
Yeah. pre-ban, it was much better. But where I see that card coming in and out of list, I've had it in my list before, is when I'm on a heavier density of red creatures, like we're always on typically Ragavan, but Orcish Lumberjack, Skirt Prospector, Impulsive Pilferer. And then we kind of scoot over, and depending on where we're at with our 3 drops, it might be some people run Burgie, some people run Professional Facebreaker. I'm never in that mindset where I'm sacking a Squee to it ever, because
Yeah.
I don't ever want Squee to be in that play.
Yeah. Spending 3 mana on Squeeze crazy.
If you're on a Micro Goblins package with Goblin Recruiter, I think it's actually a great fit there.
Hmm.
Or if you're using something like Vexing Shusher as protection, it's just another piece that you could sacrifice to it to copy your own spell to combo. Where I see that card's playability is not just protection, but it's more so like the ability to, all right, I'm going to get all my value out of my Lumberjack, sack my Lumberjack to copy my Demonic Tutor, probably win the game at that point.
Yeah.
The downside of that card is that it's not always online, and there's pros and cons to it this way. A lot of our combos don't need Korvold in play. So you could just sack the Korvold, but I don't really ever need to sack the Korvold if I'm doing the thing.
Yeah. But
So
you
it's a catch
can.
20. Yeah, you can.
Should you? We don't know. That's a high commit.
It's one of those cards where I'm kind of keeping it on the back burner just in case we get a ultra high quality red creature that is going to be a staple on our list. And I'm really honestly looking at the what is it, Edge of Eternities commander deck. That's a
Oh,
lands based list
oh,
that's Jund.
it says land sack as Jund. Oh my god, I am so hyped for that. Like so incredibly hyped. If we get some crazy support, oh my god, I'll be so happy. And they've already kind of printed some stuff and then like teased with the Final Fantasy stuff. There's some landfallers. To be honest, they're all booty cheeks, in my opinion. They're all
Yes.
so bad. Some people are like sending me Tifa to be like, yo, is this landfall Korvold stuff? I'm like, God, no.
So, Kyle, because you're in this realm now of you're the landfall Corvold guy. So now
Yeah.
everything that comes out that does anything with a land, it goes, is this a
Is this
landfall
a
Corvold
landfall
card?
Korvold card? Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. That's where we're at now.
Sorry, but you've made it. You are micro famous in that regard. So
In the landfall Korvold sphere. Um, all right, so before we move into my version of the list and kind of talking about the differences between the lands list and your list, I wanted to give you a platform to talk about any cards that you are like, these are all-star cards in the list, and they might not have fallen into any of the categories that we talked about, but just anything you want to highlight as an MVP for the Mad King list.
I gotta honestly say, Culling Ritual is that card that pre-ban was it's so good, right? And pre-ban, it was always like a post like Nas or Necro thing. Now it's just good. Like it's just you don't have any weird tensions with your Dockside Extortionist. And all your combos, again, this is the reason why we don't run Dualcaster Twin Flame, convert off of green and black mana. And it's so nice. It's
Hmm.
a must counter card. I always believe Calling Ritual has two functions. It either resolves, it wins you the game, or it gets counterspelled. And that's okay for a card to be that good. It
Yeah,
really is.
100%.
And it just allows you to convert into different things like we talked about, whether it's the combos, but it allows us to use our X mana for things like whether it's a Fidalia Devastation, but specifically Nature's Rhythm is a new card we got out of Dragons of Tarkir. This card's a bomb. Like it's an
Yeah.
absolute bomb in the deck. And when you have Nature's Rhythm, and it'll be on the screen, but it's green, green, and X, you pay X and you tutor for any type of creature and put it to the battlefield. It has the ability to pay, was it 4 green, and then what is
Harmonize.
that?
Yeah, it's
Harmonize. That's right.
Harmonize X. Yeah, so you can tap Korvold for however much you want X to be. And
Yeah,
that can get anything in your deck. Let's be honest. Korvold's chonky.
yeah. It assembles Worn Soul Trader Chatterfang very easily. I actually see other decks doing this. The 5-color Scion deck is doing the Worn Soul Trader Chatterfang
Yep.
and Korvold in their deck, which is pretty
Yep.
awesome to see.
Secret Commander. Yep.
Secret Commander. They literally say it's the best card in their deck once they do it. That should tell you something, people. If Corvold just had blue, he would be goated. But that card is so good for this deck. It replaces kind of like that weird tutor slot, but the ability to tutor anything. It doesn't have any clause like non-human or anything like that. The only downside, it just doesn't get from the graveyard. But as a card that
Hmm.
can assemble combos, so if you have access to it, you can get Warren Soul Trader Chatterfang. If you have it plus Impulsive Pilferer and Warren Soul Trader, it is self-assembling itself to go get a Chatterfang, and it's so nice in there. Those two cards I think are absolute must runs for probably any Korvold build by and large,
Yeah.
just because they're powerful and people always want like board sweepers. What's better than a board sweeper that also gives you mana back? So Culling Ritual, Nature's Rhythm, fantastic cards. I could probably talk about them for a while. In fact, that's the beauty of Korvold versus a lot of decks like Blue Farm. Like no one's like talking about like professional facebreaker for three
Yeah.
hours. Because Korvold is such a synergy based deck, all these cards kind of fit in these nice, cute little roles. And then again, we talked about LQR. Well, that's interesting. You can attack, remove the opposition agent, and then now you can use your untap to tap again to pay for the harmonized cost, kill another card, and go search. That's super sick.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready to move into the lands build and kind of just talk about like the changes and the differences between this list and your Mad King list?
Oh, I'm always down for some real estate. Let's look at the lands.
Hell yeah. Let's. Okay. So I kind of want to preface this. So lands has been around for a long time. It is super popular in Japanese meta. And when I started creating this list post ban, because lands existed pre-ban as well and was played in Japan mostly. I don't know if there were many like Western pilots on lands builds. I can't speak on them. I don't know if you know of any, Eric.
Zero.
Zero. Thank you.
Probably
Okay.
probably
I just
zero.
wanted to I just wanted to like make sure before I said that. But I post ban was looking for as we all were looking for a way to still keep Corvold alive, put in a ton of effort into building a deck that I really liked and I felt like it was super tuned at that point. And all of a sudden, I don't know if it was you who messaged me. Somebody messaged me a Landfaller Japanese list that did really well at a tournament. And I saw the list. It had a bunch of interesting things in it. It had like Alesha. But the most key important thing that I found in that list that I loved was it included Lumra. So I think that Lumra really pushed me to work on this deck. And shout out to Scylla as well, who's used to be a Corvold player. She kind of moved to a different list. She's also, a Crom Rayhan stan, but she built a Corvold landfall list, and we played at the same tournament right after the bans. And she had Lumra in the 99, and I wasn't with it originally, and then went, wow, that card is so freaking good. So shout out Scylla for getting me on Lumra, but that has been the catalyst to why this landfall list has felt so good to me. So kind of just talking about like the fundamental differences between my list or the lands list that has kind of been stitched together between a lot of fundamentals of your list plus some of the fundamentals of the Japanese landfall lists. I see this list as trying to win on turn 4 the majority of the time, but has flexibility to win turn 2, turn 3 as well, or play completely later into the game and really just develop a monstrous board state to find a window to go off and win. A big fundamental difference between our lists is actually in mulligans. So because you're on Necro, I think you have more flexibility to mulligan lower than I do on a landfall list. And I'll kind of talk about that a little bit more. I think that the lands build, you have to have lands to make it work. Because of that, you are sometimes pigeonholed into keeping quote unquote worse hands at higher card counts. So I more often than not am keeping hands that I don't necessarily want to keep in 6 or my second 7 because I need the resources. So that's a big difference between our lists is sometimes with this list we're keeping worse hands that are they function but they're slower because I won't be able to get to a game winning state without having enough resources to do so. So that is a huge fundamental difference in the list. It goes slower, but when things are churning and when you have a gas first 7 or second 7, it feels unstoppable. The explosiveness is insane. So just talking about the actual win cons of the deck, They're really similar to what you're doing right now. And when we first talked about having this conversation, you weren't on the like mini lands package. So I was expecting to talk about the aftermath analyst loops a little bit more, but we kind of already covered that. And you're like, damn, that shit's good. And I'm like, yes, Eric's on the good shit now.
Yeah, super secret list that had in the waiting that I was just getting like, I'm like, if I'm doing this episode, I want to reveal it there because that would be the best time because it will actually bring in hopefully a conversation we'll talk about, which is divergent evolution at kind of
Yeah.
maybe at the tail end, but I'll let you go for it, my friend.
Basically, that's one of the main win cons that we use to win the game. And another, like, obviously, it's still a breach deck through and through. So, like, my list is looking to win through breach, and then eventually assemble Witherbloom Chain of Smog to actively kill the table. There are some other staples in the list, such as Lumra. I also play World Shaper, which are big pullback effects. And that is an aspect of my list that your list doesn't run, which is the focus on dedicating 3 slots to sacking lands and the focus of dedicating 3 slots to pull back those lands that I've been sacking. So that is a huge difference between our lists and game plan. I am on Lumra, World Shaper, and Aftermath Analyst as my pullbacks. And then as my sack outlets, I'm on Sylvan Safekeeper, Reign of Filth, which are you on Reign of Filth currently?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So that I call that as like a half of a pullback. So Rain of Filth, for listeners if you don't know, it only affects the lands that are in play when you resolve Rain of Filth. So you can't continually loop with Rain of Filth, but it gives you one good push that a lot of times leads into something else that you can loop. So I call it like half of a sack outlet. I'm on Squandered Resources, obviously, with Sylvan Safekeeper, and then there's a flex spot between Zurin Orb or Need for Speed. I still haven't decided on this. And Eric, maybe you can help with this. But I was on Need for Speed for a long time. I think it has great synergy with 6. It has great synergy with being able to attack with Korvold and sometimes kill an opponent who might have, interaction. On the downside of that, sometimes your life total is pushed really low on this list, especially if you were deploying Black Market Connections early. So Zurin Orb can actually be really helpful in keeping yourself alive when you have Orcish Bowmasters being pointed at you, etc. So I'm kind of in between on these. I think Need for Speed is going to be what I stick with moving forward, but I have been testing Zurin Orb of recent, just because it's 0 cost. And that difference between the 0 cost and the one red pip is huge. So those are kind of the dedicated, I guess I would say, packages that this list runs that yours doesn't, which is the land sacrifice and the land pullback effects.
With that being said, when you're talking about those, if you weren't on, I mean, first off, a giant Lumra could just like literally KO an opponent.
Yes, yeah, that is true.
But also just like you said, giving Korvold haste, giving 6 haste, another giving Orcish Lumberjack haste, and your World Shaper as well.
Yep.
So for your list specifically, I think the upside for Need for Speed is a lot greater because it works in with the structure of your deck.
Mm-hmm.
Though Zern Orb, 0 mana. I mean, if it's free, it's me.
I know exactly.
You know?
And that's the thing. And that is the exact battle that I've been having. And maybe someone in the comments down below can mention like their thoughts between Need for Speed versus Zurin Orb, because they do very similar things. They function as the main purpose of being a sack outlet for your lands. That's great, right? But it's the secondary effects or the secondary benefits that kind of makes them really comparable. And don't get me wrong, I think if you like one or the other, they'll both be fine in the list. As long as you're running at least 3 dedicated sack spots, the deck feels way worse when you're on just 2 and Rain of Filth, so like 2.5. 3.5 feels way better. So please at least run those 3 plus Rain of Filth if you're going to look to do a list like this that's dedicated towards sacking lands and pulling them back. An added benefit to having dedicated spots for land sackers is it makes our breach lines a lot easier. So if you have squandered resources out, or Zurin Orb, whatever, being able to fight the escape cost to that ever present battle of having to have cards to feed to breach is really important for this list, and it makes having breach active a lot easier to navigate. So that's been a positive to being on this lands build, is I feel like I'm supporting breach in a different way where I am providing fuel to the fire when necessary. And I really like that positive about it. So another thing I want to mention in terms of the differences between our lists is just like the land count in general. And like generally speaking, if I'm going to have a focus on lands, my land count's going to be higher. So you said you're on 29, which is a lot higher since you've added the mini land package. But there's a couple of lands in particular that I am on that you aren't that provide really important roles in the deck. One of them, and one that I get most criticized on by other pilots, which I think is really funny, is Dryad Arbor. So I run Dryad Arbor in this list for a lot of reasons. And the most important reason to me is being able to GSZ for 0 on an opening turn and just use it as a ramp tool. So we're providing flexibility to a card that is inherently really good in our list. Absolutely love that. The second thing, and I think something that you can speak on, is being able to lively dirge a Dryad Arbor with a Ruthless Technomancer at the same time. And I know you want to speak on Lively Dirge because you run it in your list. So I think we can use this time to kind of talk about the power of Lively Dirge, but being able to specifically in a lands build, bring back a Dryad Arbor to trigger landfall triggers is, oh, chef's kiss.
So, do you want to hear a funny story about the Lively Dirge?
Yeah.
I'm on vacation last year. I am in the Destin, Florida area. I'm actually fishing on a pier. They have a freshwater canal where I'm staying. And it's like towards nighttime, your episode releases. That's a good card on Lively Dirge.
Yeah.
I'm listening to this while catching a 8-pound largemouth bass, like at night on top water. Like this is legitimately happening. And you mentioned the Lively Dirge because that when that card came out, I looked at it and I go, I mean, it's just Finale Devastation in black. My
Yeah.
very Neanderthal, like base level. And then I kind of started breaking that card down. I go, wait, it's Entomb plus Reanimation. That's also just getting up to 2 things back or just one big thing. So when you look at something like Ruthless Technomancer back in the day, Finale Devastation, largely there, it was X of 4, which is a lot,
Hmm.
6 mana. 5 also being 1 black pip, 4 colors, super easy to cast.
Yeah.
And again, it's modal, it's flexible. It gets your pieces, it gets your life from the loam. You might already have the creature in your graveyard that you want. Because my function for that card was always like getting either like, and just very baseline was returning something like Warren Soul Trader plus Impulsive Pilferer.
The combo. Batman and Robin, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, which just converts to like 6+ mana, draw 12 cards. But,
Yeah.
um, Lively Dirge is just one of those cards. Again, I think it's that glue card for both of our lists in a lot of ways. And again, it's one of those cards that I think kind of gets pooped on by the CDH community at whole. But if you look at like all the Grixis Malcolm list,
Hmm.
that's a staple in that list because it gets back your Glenhorn Buccaneer.
Yep.
And that card is just so powerful, and the ability in your list to get Dryad Arbor back for an additional landfall trigger, an additional sacrifice fodder, and something like Ruthless Technomancer for 5 mana, like the sum is way greater than the parts there. I don't want to sit there and say it's a must run, and put a very like definite, but I think for any list of Korvold specifically that requires graveyard synergies, sacrifice synergies, and tutor synergies, so basically every Korvold deck ever
Yes.
printed, right? You should be on Lively Dirge, and don't look at it as just a tutor card because Kyle, we get asked this question: what's the card you always search
What do
for?
you tutor for?
Well, I don't know, the card that you need. Like
Yeah, the card that you need to win the game.
the card literally helps assemble every combo, at least in my list, right?
Hmm.
So, and you're like, imagine if you could get Loomer back with it.
Okay, yeah. You can't, but
but it can put Loomer in the graveyard for you to bring back later for
it
some,
can be 100%.
the ability to assemble 6, like if you already have any of these pieces, whether it's 6 Lotus Petal, LED, Life from the Loam, Chatterfang combos, Aftermath Analyst combos, Shifting Woodland combos with those because it puts it in the graveyard. It helps cuts on Delirium. Like it literally does everything you could possibly want. And secretly, I think it's one of the best cards that Korvold has gotten in the past like year plus.
And that's the key too, is the ability to entomb any card is huge. So if you have Shifting Woodlands in the play, you can just entomb a breach, and now you have an uncounterable breach if that resolves. So it's powerful, man. And even sometimes in really tight breach lines, I've done it modally just for the entomb to entomb an LED and then be able to dump my big hand and then be able to use it again. So like if its floor is expensive entomb, the card's damn good for a breach deck.
Because Entomb's cracked anyways,
Oh
like
yeah,
as
card's
a magic
nuts.
card.
Yeah,
So a bad version that just doesn't get a creature that gets any card, I'll take that any
yeah.
day of the week.
So going back to kind of the Dryad Arbor conversation, another thing I run in my list is I'm running two basics on Prismatic Vista. I think it's key if you're running Nissa and Tireless Provisioner. The difference originally, I'll kind of I'll preface this by saying originally when I built the list, I was on a singular Surveil land and one other, I think it was City of Brass, which I'm not on. I'm on Mana Confluence, not City of Brass. The reason behind that is because I see a lot of Derevi. It doesn't matter. If you're on one or the other, it doesn't matter. But what I'm trying to say is I personally feel like having an extra fetch land to trigger Nissa the second time or get two triggers off of Tyler's Provisioner or Lotus Cobra vastly outweighs the benefit of Surveil 1. So that's kind of the reason why I'm on Prismatic Vista. And I think it's important that if you're on any lands package to be on Prismatic Vista. So that's something I was going to talk to you about, Eric. I was like, man, if you can get it, if you can make it work, I think Prismatic Vista and having another fetch land is huge. That being said, just something for you to think about.
I do have a foil Japanese retro Prismatic Vista. It is
Okay.
literally in my testing pile, and it's like if I could fit it in. Honestly, sometimes I wish I didn't need the second like Urborg slash Java Maya card, but those cards
Yeah.
are pretty
Necessary
important.
for squander resources.
Yeah,
Absolutely necessary. Yeah. But you're already on two basics, right? So
yeah,
if you're on
yeah.
two basics, I think you need to get on Prismatic Vista. And I haven't needed to have three. There's been very rare scenarios where I have failed to find with my fetches, but those are the points of the game where you already have like 10 lands, and that's not a problem. So you're fine.
I'll tinker around with it. If I can get it in, I would like that. Because first off, 10 is so aesthetic. It feels way better to have 10 fetches than 9.
Yeah.
Secondly,
True.
shout out to basics. I love it when they path like something random of mine and I go get the basic and they're like,
They're like, wait,
oh,
you have it? Yeah.
they're like, oh no.
Oh no. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. The last thing I kind of want to speak on, actually, there's two things, 2 points. One is I have a couple of additional land dropper effects. So I have exploration. I think for 1 mana, it's just a banger. I think you can see it as well through like Glarblist playing it. And sure, they can play lands off the top. We can't. But exploration for 1 mana, super low investment, and the ability to play a second land feels really good. I actually ended up cutting Carpet of Flowers for exploration just because I felt like those additional landfall effects were really, really important, especially post Nas, like being able to just drop a second land, trigger some landfallers. It just helps a lot. And the second card that I think is an all-star MVP, one of the best in the deck, is Croson Wayfarer, which I'll throw it up on the screen. It's a 1 mana for 1 green pip, 1/1, and it says sacrifice Croson Wayfarer, put a land card from your hand into play. This card is nuts. Being able to sneakily throw down an emergent zone or sneakily throw down a shifting woodlands is just something that not a lot of pilots see coming. And it also at its floor is just a Korvold trigger and add another land into play. So I think that Croson Wafer is an MVP in any landfall list. I'm sure the Japanese players already know this, but it's just an awesome card. So those are the only two like additional land drop cards I kind of run, which is Exploration and Croson Wafer. Both notably really low CMC. Got to keep that Adnos count down.
I just want to piggyback off what you were saying and just kind of add to it. That's where your list, I think, just really does the landfall synergy stuff, obviously better than mine specifically, because you're using that as like a main part of the list. I'm using that as more like a tool of my list. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the really cool part about both these lists. They're using kind of every piece of the buffalo in some way. Crows and Wayfair, again, it's another card that you can Green Sun Zenith for and Summoner's Pact for. It's
Yep.
just another tool in the list. And that's the beauty of Kyle's list. I wanted to give him credit on is where specifically he has that little bit more flexibility because of he's not necessarily always having to protect an Oz or something like that, or playing the defense grid. He gets to add a little bit more to that package. If we get to the point where Autumn's Veil just isn't good enough, I could see easily where slotting one of those types of cards into my list could just make it a lot easier to play. So
And the fact that it's just these little 1 pips, I think is another key thing. You can feel like when you're keeping those like mid 7 hands that you can deploy a lot early and just put bodies on the field, just put things that can be eaten by Corvold onto the field if necessary. The last point I'll make is I'm on two reanimate effects. I'm on reanimate itself and animate dead. And that's mostly for Lumra, right? So I have to be able to get Lumra back in easy ways. Obviously, with the explosiveness of Nissa or Lotus Cobra, sometimes I'm able to just hard cast a Lumra straight up, just because I have that much mana. That being said, a lot of times this is a reanimate target or an animate dead target. There's a couple of other creatures that you can reanimate effectively, and sometimes I'm even using those cards on Dryad Arbor, shockingly enough, to get a second Nissa trigger to kind of get the engine moving. Which is another awesome point for Dryad Arbor, is just being able to use two other cards in the list to get you over the hump, get that next landfall trigger that you need in order to get everything rolling. But yeah, other than that, those are kind of the major differences between our lists. Realistically, Eric, we're winning in the very similar ways throughout our deck. Was there any other differences in the list that you wanted to highlight? I probably have one more, and that's about the artifact count. Anything else you wanted to review?
The one thing I'd like to talk about, I'm sure you've experienced this, but just how effing busted Talon Gates is. Like,
Oh yeah, that's a good card. Another one.
so when I first saw this card, I was like, this isn't real, right? Like, this is a removal spell, a potential ramp spell, a potential double landfall triggers card, and not even a spell. I'm sorry, a land. Correct me there. But it's also a protection spell for us. Like, if you're at the point to where it's not your combo turn. People do this all the time in tournaments. I don't know why. People have ultra bad threat assessment, but they're just like, oh, I'm going to kill your Korvold just because.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, you sure you don't want to point that blue removal spell at the heuristic study that's drawing this person 6 cards? But hey, I digress. It allows your crop rotation to, again, be something that it normally isn't. It allows it to be a modal protection spell if need be. So if they try to hit one of your creatures that's a really big protection piece, or even a stacks piece that is preventing them from winning from somebody else, if it's coming back on their turn, depending on where they're at in their turn cycle, having the ability to crop rotation for that to go just put it directly into play is really, really nice to have. And when you look at how this card functions, if you're doing the thing, you might even have 2 landfall effects out. When you put it in from your hand into play for 4 colors, you're going to get probably a landfall trigger. You're probably going to you're going to get double landfall triggers, and then you're going to sack it to your squandered resources. So in that essence, it's really almost paying for itself. Plus, it taps for mana as well. So it's really kind
Yeah.
of just paying for itself as well. And that's just, again, a uniqueness about that card. And that's the beauty. That's really kind of the key. It's not even our decks versus each other. It's turbo decks or Nas decks versus other Nas decks. They're very, very, very low mana counts.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you look at something like Dihada, those are chunky Nas decks, right?
Yeah.
The ability to have access to lands to also hit your land drops to make your Mox Diamonds better, to curve appropriately while having a commander that can take advantage of that resource of mana and drawing cards. That is something both these lists do very well. Because 29 lands, if you compare that to any traditional old school Corvold list, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I think the first one I did had 26. I think that was
yeah.
where we were at. So,
I mean, I read 26 for literal years. Like, it was
yeah.
always 26 for years, but there was always the cost. I can't run as many modal effect lands, and it's just one of those things that kind of always felt like limited to the deck. And so now we have that ability by just bumping our land count. By virtue of bumping our land count up, we've reduced our NOS count.
Yep.
And that's just a win for both lists. You're running Lumra and you're like 1.15,
It's so funny. It's like I have Lumra in the list, a 6-drop, which you do have to be aware of when you're nosing. But other than that, everything is just so low, like ones and twos, ones and twos. And to kind of speak on what I was gonna bring up earlier, which is like my artifact count is super low, and I think by investing more in my lands, I do miss out on a little bit of explosive potential turn ones just by losing some of the artifacts. And it does kind of make the Nazes a little harder once you do resolve the Naz because I don't have like the Mopal, for example. I think the 2 major differences that you'll see is the difference in artifact count, which originally before you moved up, I think what ended up happening was you cut some talismans or cut some rocks to add more lands. Is that accurate just by looking at this list. That's kind of what I'm seeing. Because I think you were originally on either 14 or 15 artifacts.
Yeah, I was on somewhere in that range. Typically, it was 15 plus, depending on like what the build was.
Hmm.
But the beauty is like, and trust me, I would love to play my like, foil Japanese Fellwar Stone and Talisman of Resilience and those types of cards. But because there has to be a trade off, like you can't have everything. You can't
Yeah.
have every artifact that you need, plus plus the lands, plus the creatures, plus the ritual packages, all these things. You got to have a trade off. So I'd rather go up a little bit in lands, reduce my mana value of my deck, translate those lands to more fetchable lands, or again, lands with abilities
Hmm.
to empower things like crop rotation, and then reduce that count. But I still like the Mopal, even though it feels kind of ugly early. But I'm trying to figure out like what's the best way to post Nas, and also
Mm.
it does lend to have some pretty busted openers when you do get the Soul Ring Arcane Signet opener,
Yeah.
like, and then you get the follow up with a Mopal. You're
Mopal.
just
Whew,
like, yeah, yeah,
the heater.
you get to really do some disgusting things. And that's just that small micro decision between our list. And it's not even that big of a decision, but that just shows you I'm still prioritizing ad nauseum
Yep.
and that explosivity. You're prioritizing, hey, I am a lands package list and I'm trying to be the best version of that. So that's where the divergent evolution kind of happens with our list. But ultimately, once we're both doing the thing, we're doing the thing.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what, Artifact? I got to tell you this because we talked about this a little bit. You know what Artifact we're both not on that everybody else plays? The One Ring.
Oh, the One Ring.
The
No, trash. Trash. I'm gonna get a lot of heat in the comments. No, I truly believe that it's just something that, yes, I'm trying to go slow. I don't need to go that slow. And I'd rather develop these smaller, dorky pieces that kind of lead me into a more versatile state than pay something for 4 mana that's going to draw me 1 card on one turn, and 2 cards on another turn, then 3 cards on another turn. That rate is not nearly as good as me even playing like something like a Croson Wayfarer when I have a Korvold out, right? It's like I'm going to be drawing those cards based on these little dorks that I'm playing, or like an Impulsive Pilfer, right? Like when Impulsive Pilfer gets sacrificed, it's going to draw me a card. When it makes a treasure, it's going to draw me a card. So like the trade-off between playing little dorky things that are going to draw me cards as at a same consistent rate as something that I'm going to have to invest 4 mana into, and who knows, maybe it catches a Fierce Guardianship, you know? That's kind of where I'm at on the One Ring.
I had to bring that up just because this is how you know the One Ring is starting to fall out of popularity as the format is trying to speed up. Is that Rogthras is cutting it, and Rogthras can abuse it.
Damn. With untappers. That's crazy. I didn't even know
Yeah,
that. I mean, I have my own Rogthras list that I made for the podcast. I don't know if you know, but I've been trying to learn other decks to make me a better Korvold pilot. So I have a Rogthras built. I believe I am on One Ring, but I'll consider that.
the way I look at it is if Sam Black cuts it, then it's probably the right decision. And and Sam Black is like, this
Uh,
is something I've talked about on another on Lamora's channel, is like Sam's already one of the best Magic players of all time. And we said this a couple of years ago. If pro Magic players, like the true pro Magic players, if they start switching to CEDH, they're just going to break CEDH. And if you think about it, that's what he did with the Rogthras deck. Like
Oh,
he is
100%.
the guy
Yeah, he's
who broke
cooking.
Rog. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to play with him in 60 card and EDH. He still doesn't have a win over me yet, so we're still tied at
Nice.
like, yeah, we're still tied.
Nice.
We're both drawing every game, so we're taking a loss. But
Yeah.
joking aside, when I see people like that, when they make a decision like that, I'm gonna listen. I'm not gonna question. I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna
Yeah.
see why, and then I'll ask questions.
And test yourself. I think that's the key too.
And that's something I would like to apply to all Corville players. Don't take my list, don't take Kyle's list and go, you know what? I'm going to cut this card because, I'm scared of it or it doesn't function the way I think it does. It's like,
Hmm.
please test the list, draw conclusions, and then retest it with the conclusions as your information and just kind of literally repeat the
Yeah.
scientific process
Over and
and
over
then
again.
go
Yeah.
from there. Yeah.
Hypothesize and test. It's literally just keep making hypothesis. It's like that's it.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, just seeing the One Ring, and it's one of those cards that I feel like I played it like post ban, but the every time I would if I don't see it on turn 2, It's really, really booty cheeks. Like, um, and while like a card that we haven't even really talked about that's actually just super goated in our list is Black Market Connections.
BMC. Yep. I was just
Oh,
about to do that transition. I was going to
well
say
then,
that's one of my
then
signpost cards.
go
So
for it, Kyle. Go
yeah,
for
so
it.
in my primer, I kind of talk about what a lot of times people say if they're new to the lands list, they ask how do you approach mulligans? And I have three signpost cards. This is like I literally made a shitty Photoshop of like mulligans for dummies, and I put Nissa, Six, and Black Market Connections on the image. It's like these three cards are what you are looking for in your mulligans, and Black Market Connections is top tier. A turn one Black Market Connections. I don't know if I've lost a game with turn one Black Market Connections. It is so good at giving you all the things that Korvold needs. And you mentioned that earlier. Drawing cards, creating some resource that can be sacked or utilized in a different way in the shapeshifter, and making a treasure, which can be used to make mana and draw more cards. It's like everything that we want in an engine baked into one. It's fascinating to me that I hadn't tested this card pre-ban because I never did. I've seen it in lists, but I personally was like, that seems a little slow. I'm just trying to play Dockside and reanimate Dockside over and over again, so maybe I shouldn't look at it. I wish I was looking at it back then. And I know you've had it in your sideboard for a very long time and probably tested it a lot. But in terms of like the draw engines we have access to, I put Black Market Connections over Sylvan Library. I put it over the One Ring, and I put it way over something that I tested for a little bit in Ripples. So Ripples of Undeath, I think that I have a love-hate relationship with that card, and ultimately I don't play it because of the hate side. But I just think Black Market Connections is just an absolute banger. Where do you kind of rank it in terms of the draw engines that we have access to?
It's got to be number one, right? Like if we're not talking about like Six as just an
Nah.
engine on its own, if we're talking about like our poor man's Ristic study kind of effect,
Hmm.
it's got to be number one. And I honestly want to credit Japan for that card because that's a card I saw. I think it was roughly 2 years, maybe it was and it's so weird to say 2025 now. In
Yeah.
2023, one of the Japanese players, I think he went like he was like first in Swiss with Korvold,
Hmm.
which was so awesome to see. And he had a lands package built into his Turbo ad nauseum Korvold's list. And that's where it kind of really started, like roughly for me 2 years ago when I built that deck. I didn't change the list. And it was running like weird cards like Treacherous Blessings. And we could talk about some of the
The
Japanese
Japanese
spice.
spice is crazy. Like Spinner of Souls, I see a
Uh,
lot. Yeah.
but when I was playing that card and I went like, you know, crypt into turn one Black Market Connections, I just went, oh, okay, well, I don't think I can, like, I literally don't think I can lose because the one thing that people don't talk about in Korvold, drawing cards in Korvold, and it may not be as true post ban as it was pre ban.
Mhm.
Drawing a card in Korvold is so much more impactful to advance you to win the game than it is in most other decks. Because most other decks are drawing Force of Wills and more the One Rings and those types of things. By and large, aside from the minor protection package that it has, it's drawing you a card to advance you to a win. Like any tutor wins you the game in the right position. And
Yeah.
and that can be said true for some decks, but decks like Tim Necrom, their tutors don't inherently translate to a win because they may not have the A plus B. Corvold's tutor will get you to the A plus B.
Yeah.
And that's just because of its insane ability. I effectively think that Corvold itself, in terms of the ability of whenever something sacrifices you draw a card, is the most powerful ability in Commander on a Commander. Not necessarily the most powerful Commander, um,
Yeah.
or the most broken Commander, but I think the ability itself,
Is incredibly powerful.
like
Yeah.
staple that on Crom instead of what Crom has now. It would be unbelievable,
Insane.
right?
Yeah.
Like yeah, absolutely insane. So that's something that's just isn't really discussed a lot with Corvold specifically, but yeah, Black Market Connections, it's so good. It has great synergy with Chatterfang, actually. That's a mini engine package.
No, it is.
When you're making a treasure, drawing a card, and making a 3/2, by the way, that 3/2 is very relevant. And this is how I explain to people. People are scared about the loss of life. But if that 3/2 prevents a Ragavan or a Temna from hitting you, then that is worth the
The
life that
loss
you
of life. Yeah.
paid. And then guess what? Now you have more material for Warren Soul Trader.
Mhm.
It translates so well into all the micro synergies of the deck.
Diabolic Intent, Culling the Weak. Like we can go on.
Yeah, just I need to go search out one of my 3-drop creatures with Nature's Rhythm off the harmonize ability. Oh, I'll tap my 3/2. Pretty easy.
Yep.
Again, it is the buffalo and it uses all pieces of the buffalo. That's the best part. I think it's so weird that people don't play that card. I think it's the loss of life that scares them
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, but we're an ad nauseum list. But I'm gonna take the veil off of this for all ad nauseum players because people are always we hear about it all the time in the Discord.
Hmm.
I was playing Necro, Wheel of Misfortune, Bolus of Citadel, Ad Nauseum. You know why? Because typically when one of those cards resolve, you win the game. So it
Yep.
doesn't matter about all the other cards. So when you're able to advance your board state and use a powerful effect, whether it's Ad Nauseum, Black Market Connections, or Necro to some degree, or anything that uses life as a resource to draw cards, or like something even like Bolus of Citadel, which we haven't even talked about. There's builds of it that are seeing some play. But those are going to advance you to a win. That's what matters because those other cards at that point are irrelevant. You
Yeah.
don't need them. You don't need them as much.
Hmm.
If I have 10 life left, I can transition a Chatterfang win from there because I'm going to probably be able to get down to 2 total life as
Yeah.
long as there's not like an OBM or something into play. That's 16 cards and 8 mana.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
We
Like,
just talked about how the list, if you draw a card, you're probably drawing a card that's going to make you move forward in your board state. Now you're drawing 16 of them. I think you're good.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think you're fine.
Yeah, Black Market Connections is just it's probably one of the most underplayed cards as a whole in the
Yeah.
format, and I'm seeing other decks play it. I'm seeing the most prominent Ihata pilot switch to that card. I'm just
Yeah.
seeing a lot of
Hey,
these like
makes
because
sense
it
with those treasure synergies. Yeah.
treasure synergies material. They're a culling the weak deck, and again, even if you're just using it for drawing a card and making a treasure,
Yeah. It's like a Phyrexian arena. You're just like drawing a card. Yeah.
and making mana. Which
Yeah.
at that point, if you think about it, like a Sylvan Library, I mean, it's 2 cards for 8 life. This is 2 cards and a mana for 3 life.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't think there's really a choice there.
Yeah. And
Like,
you get a body. Yeah.
and you get a body.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So I mean, that's just kind of like if you want to go into the Mulligan theory of my list, I have it pretty well written out into my primer when it comes to like looking at those three options, whether it's Nissa, Six, or Black Market Connections. Like those are really what you're going for, with the occasional like you just draw the nuts and you have a Witherbloom Chantismog turn two, and nice. But other than that, like that's what we're looking for. I do want to kind of transition into some mulligans because I know that that's what a
Yeah.
lot of people are going to want to hear. I've brought up a couple of hands for you. So we're going to do the Mad King list, and I'll put this up on the screen so the listeners can kind of play along too. Go ahead and pause the video. So test hand one, the seat positions are Kinnan, and then we're in second seat with Korvold, then Blue Farm, then Atali. We're on a mull to 5. Our cards are Ragavan, Summoner's Pact, City of Brass, Badlands, Simian Spirit Guide, Warren Soul Trader, Arid Mesa. On a mold of 5, Eric. Are you liking this? Keeping it? What are you pitching?
If I'm on a mold of 5 and I'm in this pod specifically in seat 2, I really feel like Kennen and Atali could just push because they know I'm not going to be able to interact with them, specifically with me going to 5.
Hmm.
And honestly, they probably don't know what I'm playing because
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
respects. To be fair, nobody respect. They'll probably be like, "Oh, he's a food chain deck," that
Yeah,
type of thing.
yeah.
What I really love about this hand, I get a Ragavan, which is great.
Hmm.
I'm an early seat with Ragavan, which is really good. I have a combo in my opening hand already. So the way I
Hmm.
look at it is I'm going to probably I'm keeping this. I'm keeping the Ragavan, the Summoner's Pack, the City of Brass, the Warren Soul Trader, and Arid Mesa. And I am going to bottom the Simian Spirit Guide and the Badlands because I can tutor out the Badlands if that's the land I want with the Arid Mesa, or if I need a green source, I have access to it and take a little bit pressure off the City of Brass.
Yeah.
So that is my 5 that I am keeping, and I get the option to push for uh, if especially with the way Atali functions. Atali just produces so much mana. I would like for Atali to attempt to go for a win first if Kennen doesn't just have the Natty Basalt as they typically always have.
Hmm.
And Blue Farm is, when I look at this, Blue Farm's the table police by and large. Again, anything can happen. They could just have Thassa's combo, that type of thing, because there's 2 non-blue, even though there's 2 other decks that could be running Red Blast, Pyro Blast, those types of things. But if I'm not respected, I'm going to win because I have mana generation and potentially card generation, Ragavan. And then
Hmm.
I have one of the best combo pieces in my deck in Warren Soul Trader. So if, let's say, a Tali pushes and they go for it and everybody exhausted resources, or they don't have the type of resources to stop me, I can simply just go Summoner's Pact for a Chatterfang. And
Yep.
then I've got the requisite creature sacrifice and I have the mana, and I'm just going to go in for that. I'm going to push for that win. That's what I would.
Yeah. And I had already put my answer hidden away for this. So it was similar answers. I keep it as well. I mulligan away the Simian Spirit Guide. And I said the Arid Mesa. I don't know if this was just because it was late at night or what, but I guess my thought process might be like if we're choked on lands and we're not 100%, like we want to make sure 100% we're going to be able to play our creatures. Like in the off chance Blue Farm is playing opposition agent, like
Yep.
maybe I don't want to take that risk. It doesn't really matter if you're keeping Air Mesa or Badlands, I don't think. But maybe the optimal play is one or the other. But I think this is a keep as well. If you have a third body, a Warren Soul Trader, and an ability to tutor for a Chatterfang, hell yeah, keep that all day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Second test hand, we have our pod will be Hashiton, Rog Thras, Magda, and then us in the fourth seat, womp womp, on Korvold. So we're on a mold of 6 here. The hand is Dark Ritual, Beseju, Command Tower, Bloodstained Mire, Delighted Halfling, Assassin's Trophy, and Gamble.
Well, I've had the option. I'd probably mulligan this hand,
Okay.
but if we're keeping it,
Now, explain. No, explain why you would mulligan this hand.
so Rogthras and Magda operate in such a way that they can just really Rogthras number one is going to put the pressure on the table to me because they're the most power to me. They're the most powerful deck here in terms
Mhm.
of mana acceleration. It's really hard to interact with Cradle, and we're just going to assume that they have a really solid keep. They're going to put the pressure. I don't think Magda's fast enough to deal with what Rogthras is doing. Magda really needs to get under Rogthras, and I think that's really, really hard to do
Mhm.
outside of them having a early Blood Moon, and that would be bad for us anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
Good thing we're running those basics, right? No.
and and I don't ever really want to be in the position of the control player. And I
Mhm.
have two really solid pieces in this matchup with Assassin's Trophy and Beseju. I really like the Beseju because it stops really a lot what Magda and Rogthras has. So it's kind of hard to want to, mulligan that away.
Yeah, it's pretty
But
powerful.
gamble already, like I'm going to have to go. Let's say I keep this. I'm probably going to bottom the Dark Ritual
Oh, interesting.
if I'm in that position because I don't want to look at Beseju as a land drop. I want to look at it as a spell.
Hmm.
So then I've got whether it's I'm probably going to draw a card, Command Tower, then Delighted Halfling and pass. That's probably my opening play. Now I do have a counter argument for this. I could look at this and go, I'm just going to go all in on Ad Nauseam. I'm just gonna keep Dark Ritual. I'm gonna
Yeah.
basically give myself a 50% chance here and basically bottom. At that point, I'd probably bottom the Assassin's Trophy because I'll keep the
Mhm.
mana acceleration, the lands, the Dark Ritual, and then just gamble for the Nas. Probably try to push about a turn 3. Um, that very, very much probably won't work out,
Yep.
but those are my two options. And I want to give players the thought process to do that because I do believe people don't
Yeah.
push as often as they should. But if this was like Vampiric Tutor or Imperial Seal or Demonic Tutor, I feel way better about this hand than a gamble at this particular point. Or if I had something like a 6 or something that the gamble is like, okay, it's okay if I like tutor this way. I just don't think you have the ability to not look for a faster hand because Hashiton can do some things, even though luckily Hashiton's very, very much on the downtrend. Rogthras and Magda are top 5, 6 decks easily.
Hmm.
Rogthras might be really reality. It might be top 2. Magda's right there at that 5, 6 slot. It's a very, very good deck, very respectable because it does the one thing very well. So I would want to either mulligan for a faster hand that does something like a Warren Soul Trader Chatterfang, or more so like tutor for the Nas or Necro. Or if I am going to keep this hand, go for the aggressive strategy.
Yeah. So my answer for this, I kind of got to where you got to a little bit, and I'll kind of talk about my thought process why. So I saw that this was a keep, and I would pitch the Ass Trophy. Um, Beseju is good enough for me to break glass in case of emergency, and honestly, I might turn one gamble to try to get a turn 2 Necro if it feels right. So my thought process here of doing this like super high risk, stupid, really move is like for me, I'm seeing I'm in seat four against some really good decks. And I don't mind in a tournament setting taking super risky plays to put myself in a position and move myself from that 13% win rate in seat four to potentially have a chance of winning the game. Because to me, if I'm already mulliganing to five, I'm in trouble a little bit. And maybe that's my landfall speaking a little bit. But I don't mind this as like a YOLO necro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. You could do that. I mean, you could technically even YOLO Nas,
You could, yeah.
if that's something you believe. And again, if I'm in there, and I don't want to sit there and base it based on my win loss record,
Hmm.
but if I already got like, let's say I'm doing really well and I'm kind of locked, I might just be like, look, let's just see what the deck can really do and try to do that because these
Yeah.
are the types of things when you had access to Dockside and Crypt, I would just probably go all in on it and just make them have it, especially because people would be like, I'm gonna try to like mulligan for my Ristic effect or something like
Yeah.
that. And I don't really think any of these decks are like I haven't looked at a Hashaton list in a while. I don't know what their wheel situation is like. I don't know if they're on Windfall or not, but I don't feel like that's
They
a deck.
probably are actually because I think
Yeah.
they like to fill their graveyard, but I'm not sure. All right, let's move to the next one. So this hand, playing the Mad King list, we are in seat one. Ding, 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 ding. First seven, we have Korvold, us first, Sisse, Kenrith, and then Rogsai. First seven, we have Tinderwall, Mox Diamond, Underworld Breach, Ignoble Hierarch, Impulsive Pilfer, Lotus Petal, Misty Rainforest.
Hmm.
I think this is one of my favorite ones.
It's a really interesting hand.
Yeah.
It has some mana generation, and you're basically a tutor away from like making something really happening. The Mox Diamond really kind of stinks for me.
Yeah.
Um, this would probably be I'm 99% sure I would ship this
Oh, okay.
and go for a little bit cleaner hand, especially in this pod. Because I'm gonna be quite honest with you, I don't really respect Sisse and Kenrith currently in the meta.
They're
Like
slow.
Sisse's they're slow and like Sisse's a good deck, but I think people overestimate Sisse's like actual interaction. They don't run a ton of interaction.
Mm-mm.
They're not like
A
a three
stupid
color blue
Urtai.
deck.
I hate Urtai.
Yeah.
That's their interaction. Yeah.
And Kenrith is basically five color what we do. Like they are like by and
Yeah.
large, a lot of them, not all, but a
Yeah.
lot of them are the Chatterfang, Soul Trader combo setups, and it's just like a bunch of creatures. So I don't
Yeah.
like they're looking to play like Land Dork Go basically
Mhm.
effectively, and then you got Rogsai. So Rogsai is the pressure point to me in this match. So I need to figure out what I can do for Rogsai now depending on the ROG side, there's a counter argument to this to where I could look to keep this really greedy, aggressive hand and ROG side go for an
Wheels
early
us. Yeah.
wheels us, which would be just so gas. Oh man.
At that point, though, like a Rogsai in seat four, are they really going to be doing that once they see what we deploy? Probably not. That'd be pretty crazy if they do. But I've seen crazier from Rogsai players, so maybe they just like have the full blinders on.
Yeah. But I would mulligan and respect like if I'm
Yeah.
keeping this and I'm being the most responsible player I can, I'm mulliganing this 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah, the key for me is like we're first seven, right?
Yeah.
So my answer that I had hidden here was a mulligan. We have lots of resources, but no tutor or payoff. Breach does nothing currently, and Mox Diamond sucks right now. So
Yeah.
I think it's one of those hands. This is a shiny hand that a new Korvold pilot might keep because they're like, whoa, we have Underworld Breach. We're a breach deck. This seems good. Whoa, we have fast mana. That seems good. Whoa, we can deploy stuff early. That seems good. But I think by and large, this is a bait hand. And I purposely kind of sculpted this one to see if we'd come to the same conclusion. I'm glad we did.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, next one. So we're switching over to the landfall list, switching it up on you. We're in seat three. So player one is Malcolm Vile. Player two is Magda. We are in seat three. And then Rog sign seat four again. Always looming, huh? The hand is six Exploration, Badlands, Summoner's Pact, Wooded Foothills, Vampiric Tutor, and a Beseiju. Eric, what are your thoughts on this one?
We have 3 mana sources minimum. With that, I really like this hand. It's a very safe, solid hand. You have 2 really cool pivot points with the Vampiric Tutor and the Summoner's Pact. Summoner's Pact, not so much early on, but it just allows you to do something later in the game.
Hmm.
Maybe turns with this type of hand, I could see potentially developing a turn 3 to obviously to me very clearly a turn 4 the way this deck's designed. But
Hmm.
Vampiric Tutor just allows you so much flexibility. And what's really unique about the Vampiric Tutor here is you don't have to make a decision what you're doing based on your seat position. Or
Hmm.
like in your opening hand, you get to choose what to do based on Malcolm Vile or Magda and the eighth card you're going to draw, especially this being a 7. You have
Yep.
3 lands to support the exploration. Your floor is a turn 2 6. Like that's your floor.
Yeah.
That's what the deck wants to see. It's a signpost card. Second 7, I really like this.
For a second 7, I think this is a slam dunk. Kind of threw this up there. I put in my notes, if we die, we die. So Besage is great versus a breach deck. We don't have a ton of interaction to stop what's happening. I'm a little scared of Malcolm Vile seat 1 and Rogsai seat 4 just because those are two really fast decks. We don't have a ton of answers for that, but at the same time, like you said, we have a signpost card, we have flexibility in Vampiric Tutor, and we have 7 cards with 3 lands in a landfall list. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
So cool. The next hand, another lands test hand, we have ourselves in the 4th seat. First seat is Urza. Second seat is Kenrith. Third seat is Blue Farm. And us in 4th. This is a 6. So we have Demonic Tutor, Lumra, Culling the Weak, Imperial Seal, Windswept Heath, Forest, Arid Mesa. What are your thoughts, Eric?
Well, first off, I'm very shocked to see Urza being played. More shocked than even Korvold.
There's one in my meta.
Unless it's like Eisenherz, that's the only Urza player that I actually know. Obviously, he's quite good on that list. But so this is really interesting. So I'm going to largely ignore. So this is a 6, right?
Yep.
So this is really interesting. A lot of people may not know what this can do. So you can actually assemble ad nauseum pretty easily with this hand. And you actually have the payoff with you can go demonic tutor. Now you're asking a lot, right? You're asking both your tutors to resolve. And this is where the unique spot of Dryad Arbor can be get by Windswept Heath, right? So you have the creature, to go get. So you could set that up. You have the Calling the Weak. You could potentially do that. Now, for me, based on my seat position, where I'm at, I'm trying to think, okay, for Kyle's list and what he discussed about the signpost cards, can I get those cards into play on turn 2? Can I get ahead? Because I'm in seat 4. I'm not in a good seat. And I'm not even going to try to discuss about playing for a draw at all because that's
Yeah,
you're
nah.
more like
We're
it's
Korvold. Never
crazy.
do that.
Yeah, you're more likely to draw than you are to get a win in seat 4 based on the data that we're seeing, which is really sad. But that's another discussion for another day. It's kind of tough because I actually don't know what I'm getting from this Urza. Like, is it the turbo version or is it the stacks version?
Yeah.
That's kind of an unknown. There's some pluses to this hand if it's the stacks version. If they're like a back to basics version, you have the forest if need be.
Yeah.
Kenrith, again, I sound like I'm pooping on 5-color Kenrith because like a fellow friend of both of ours both plays Kenrith. Currently, I think they're switching, but I'm not trying to poop
Yeah.
on it. But it's just like one of those decks that I'm more scared of Kenrith if the games go longer. And this hand's
Yeah.
is trying to develop a lot of mana. Blue Farm is just it's classic Blue Farm. It does Blue Farm things. Um, for me, if I don't have an acceleration piece, if that was like Dark Ritual, I think I might be more inclined to keep it.
Yeah.
Because it requires to sacrifice a creature, which ultimately means sacrificing my land that I'm getting with Windswept Heath. I might be inclined to mulligan it away if Loomer wasn't in my hand, and it's kind of tough because that's the card to me I'm bottoming, right? Like more
Mm.
than likely, because I'm not going to be able to really deploy Lumra like as early as I'd want to.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. All right. I'm going to reveal my answer on
reveal.
this one. This was a very interesting one. So, my answer for this one is I actually don't hate it. And this is purely pod composition based, right? I would actually probably pitch the forest, or return one Imp Seal for a D half if we don't top deck some sort of acceleration. And the reason why I go for this is actually resolving a Lumra using the Delighted Halfling to make it uncounterable. If we can somehow get the Calling the Weak to resolve, which I think we will, we can get a turn 3 Lumra into a setup with turn 4 with a ton of lands into play. And I'm actually sitting pretty with another tutor available in a demonic tutor. So my thought process with this, right, is we're playing against a really slow pod in Urza, Kenrith, and Blue Farm. They have a ton of control. I think the calling the weak resolves the majority of the time because they know that they can probably counter the next thing coming. Now, that being said, I have to create a legendary green mana. Maybe they'll know what my list is doing. Maybe they don't. I highly doubt they do. So that's kind of my thought process with this is like it's a really slow pod. I think I'm able to just develop a Lumra into a bunch of lands on my turn 4 with a tutor. That's my thoughts.
So this is now will advocate for this hand for this reason. This is one where you can show them your hand and be like, "Look, I'm not going for ad nauseum. I'm just going to cast my Lumra and gain some lands. I
Yep.
have no other cards in my hand."
Yep.
So this is where I think the politicking aspect really pulls into support of this. Another thing that's pretty interesting that you can do that I didn't even think about just off the top of my head. Let's say you did put the Lumra to the bottom for that reason and
Hmm.
you go, all right, I'm gonna let's see, this is gonna sound really wild. I'm gonna actually you can Imperial Seal for something like Impulsive Pilferer,
Okay.
and that just gives you another option to sack to a Culling the
The
Week
week.
to
Yeah.
yeah, if you want to build your Nas, if that's the way your game plan is. If you it just depends on what track of your mindset. It's to
Yeah.
me, I've always found minimal success in requiring 2 tutors to resolve, for me
I agree
personally.
with that.
Um, so that's a lot of ask. I do love the politicking aspect and just be like, "Hey, I'm just putting Illumra into play."
Hmm.
Like, it's
Yeah.
just a big creature. I have no other combo pieces. I'm just developing my land.
Yep.
So I think that allows you to be kind of free and clear because that's the least scary thing that could happen at the table.
And that's just one of those things where like this is a great hand to kind of talk about my decision making in pods. Like this is a pod that I would see in my meta. This is why I created it. There's an Urza
Right.
player, there's Kenrith Control, and there's Blue Farm players, right? It's like this is 100% the line that I would take against those players because I know they're mulliganing for, the ability to have counter spells and they just want to sit back and wait. And one thing that the landfall list does well is ramp a shitload of lands because the turn 4 is juicy. We have a ton of lands. We're able to cast our Korvold and potentially have fetches available to draw more cards with. So that's kind of how I see that hand.
Yeah, and I think for you, knowing your meta that well, as long as they're not mental misstepping you, I think you'll be fine on that one.
Mental misstep is soul crushing in this hand. But we can't be afraid of that, right? It's like we're going to be keeping
No.
hands regardless of whether or not a mental misstep is coming down. And we're in seat 4, so I'm hoping that maybe they mental misstep something else on seat 1, turn 1, 2, or 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm sure Urza and Kenrith want to slow down Blue Farm the most.
100%. And I think that that's kind of how that goes the majority of times. But wow, we got through some mulligans. We got through talking about both of these awesome lists. Is there any closing segments or closing arguments you want to talk about before we wrap up here? We've recorded for 3 hours. And I bet you we could go for another 3 hours, but we will
Honestly,
not.
not now. No. So one of the things that ultimately I want to bring to people's attention, there are so many different types of CDH players out there. There are people who just play the game because they enjoy CDH and they enjoy that little bit higher level, more explosive style than, let's say, I guess the now term is bracket 4.
Hmm.
And then you've got your CDH grinders. And I'm talking about the people who go to every event, posts onto Twitter, X, Blue Sky, whatever that may be, to let you know their results, how they're playing, what deck they're playing. And then there's obviously the podcasting group and the YouTubers that also
Hmm.
play in tournaments that are trying to utilize those tournaments to generate views and then build their reputation that way. And then there's people who just, enjoy deck building, I believe, and just playing. That's like a Sam Black. Sam Black just does his thing and just keeps winning.
Yep.
So
Just win.
and
It's easy.
yeah, he's a just win thing. But for me specifically, I get asked this a lot of time, and another fellow YouTuber podcaster basically on their channel said if Eric played a blue deck, he would probably win most of his tournaments because I've
Yeah.
played against this player multiple times now in tournaments, and I've never lost against him. I was able to magically pull together almost like an insurmountable win out of a mulligan to 3 in seat 4 against Rogsai, Kennen, and Talion. Just taking my time, biding my position, those types of things. And the reason why I play Korvold is just because I really enjoy it. I could really
Hell
care
yeah.
less. And this is what's funny. When I play Korvold, when I play with my friends and stuff, I play other decks. I don't really play Korvold. I actually play
Hmm.
Rogside, Blue Farm, Yoshi Thras. Right now, I've been on a kick on Thras Francisco as the turbo list,
Oh,
the one from the tournament from Italy. That player has done extremely well with that. They've won one and they came in second place on it. Um, Atali, Glarb, you name it, because I feel like it's my responsibility if I'm going to play Korvold is to know all the other decks I'm going against.
preach.
That helps me politic. That helps me know what people are up to. I also enjoy Rock Thras, and it's not like I'm dedicating as much time as these other players, but while I'm dedicating time to Blue Farm, Kennen, all the top decks, plus I cover these decks in depth every single quarter. I
Hmm.
look through the data. I go through this. I know these decks in and out by and large. If they are a top 20 deck, I probably know them. Or if they're a bottom 20 deck, but they have like a 40% conversion rate, I probably know what they're doing. The
Yeah.
reason why I mentioned that is I played those decks so I could play Korvold like as best as I can. And I know I'm handicuffed with Korvold. Like I know
Yeah.
I'm I know the downsides to it. I have never once ever thought Korvold a top 5 deck, though last year it was in top 10 for a quarter of the year, which was really nice to see that it was there.
Yeah.
Um, I think the CDH mindset at large is very, very limited. And it's because it's a super expansive format, right? Like it's we're playing vintage commander. And I don't think people really put that in perspective.
Hmm.
Vintage is this ultra underexplored format, and people get hyper fixated on one thing. The people who say, I'll never play Corval have probably never played Corval
Hmm.
ever. But then you'll see people like Comedian who did play Corvold and they smashed with it and they won. You know, because Comedian A is a good player, probably arguably one of the best players in our game.
Hmm.
And they were able to take a deck that they know pretty well because they know how Magic works. They know how CDH works.
Yep.
You know, broaden your horizons. That's all I got to say. Don't be super dismissive. It's why I don't actually, I've removed myself from a lot of discords because people are just super like, oh, that sucks. That sucks. That sucks. You know,
Yeah. Close-minded is a great term I'd use for a lot of the CEDH community.
yeah, very close-minded, and I really hate the fact that you have to do well in a big event for a deck that has potential to be legitimized. Whether the
Yeah.
deck's doing really well at gold level, silver level, obviously we don't want to always take our F&M results, but you know,
Yeah.
if a deck has
Topping an
if
8-player FNM.
yeah, and we see that. We see people
Yeah.
post like that a
Yeah.
lot. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and everybody has the right to feel how they want to, but ultimately Magic is this very expansive, ever shifting like ecosystem.
Hmm.
And it happens all the time. We see it in modern, we see it in standard, we see it in legacy, even to now. Legacy's had the most movement it's ever had. Vintage has had the most movement it's ever had because we see a tremendous amount of sets being printed and product being printed, and it's so hard to keep up with all the new cards.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't even explored stock up fully in like Turbo List at all,
Hmm.
or even not even Turbo, Ancient Tomb decks, you know, those types of things. And we're starting to see that like little by little pick up. So if you think something is just like very interesting, or you think something has potential, test it, play it. If it fits your style, awesome, roll with it. But just because like you don't automatically agree with it, don't just be super dismissive. And that's why like I just don't interact with a lot of part of this community because it's just like, well, you do realize that your deck at one point was a fringe deck, right? Like all decks start off as
Fringe.
fringe.
Yes.
I hate that term so much because it's
Yeah.
like,
And it's not
well,
a meta deck. It's like, well, every deck at one point was Fringe.
yeah. And obviously we know there's layers to this. We know that decks obviously are very good. It's really hard to argue that Blue Farm's not the overall best performing deck. I
Hmm.
think it's got like already like 7 or 8 wins in 2 months and 60 plus level players are higher, which is just that's what it's gonna do. But
Yep.
we're starting to see other decks come out. Like Atali has like 3 or 4 wins over the last 2 months,
Oh
like
yeah.
in bigger events,
Yeah.
you know.
Gruel. That's crazy.
Rogside's back on the upswing. Rog Thras is obviously on the
Yeah.
upswing. Glarb, a deck that was really popular and it's still really popular, its performance has dropped. It's
Yeah.
like I think had one top 16 in the last 2-ish months, and it's like its conversion rate's like 5%. I would never say Glarb's a bad deck. It's a soul tie pile
Yeah.
with a good commander. You know what I mean? It may not
Yeah.
be like highly performing right now, but its floor is still Sultai. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
it's like you still have Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation in your deck.
yeah. So more so not about either of these lists. I just think that people need to have a little bit more open mindedness about it and explore. And and what
100%.
happens is when people explore, they go, "Oh wow, these cards are actually pretty good." And then they put like a big thread of like how they broke X deck. Like the Aboro Breeze
Yeah,
Caller and Rogthras
yeah.
really cracks me up because that was a that what is the blue green commander that's like blue green 3 whenever land enters to play, you draw a card and gain a life. Tristani,
Oh,
maybe?
oh, yeah, the Merfolk one?
Yeah, that
Tatiova?
one.
Is it
Tatiova.
Tatiova?
Yeah,
Tatiova,
that
yeah.
is Tatiova. That was an old Tatiova tech, and
Yeah,
also that was a Kadama blue plus commander effect as well from
yeah,
like years ago, and then that was something that people thought was absolutely ridiculous back then, and they were
yeah,
already doing the cradle stuff then. Now they're like, oh my gosh, it's the
yeah.
second coming of Dockside, and it's broken in those decks, and it's just nice to see that old just because something isn't as good as it used to be, you can put it on the back burner. You can archive it, but you
Yeah.
always still have access to it because Magic repeats itself. And if you look at all standard formats, unless it's an absolutely brand new mechanic, constructed formats repeat themselves whether they're modern, standard, legacy,
Hmm.
eternal. And this isn't a 60 card constructed, it's a 100 card constructed. And cards get cycled in and out. And we've talked about different cards that have come in and out of our list. And we
100%.
just see that.
And there's a reason that these archetypes stick around, right? It's like you're gonna see it's always going to be cyclical, regardless of what people say.
Yep.
I think it's really funny when people say that the format is stale because it's always cycling, right? It's like you just said, Rocksight's coming back. So it's like everyone's like, oh, it's mid-range hell. But then now we're seeing a resurgence of turbo. It's like it's always going to be an ebb and flow. And it's up to you as a pilot to make changes to your deck to adapt to the meta. This is all one giant plug for my podcast, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. That's a good card. So, Eric, what you're saying is we should be taking fringe cards and evaluating them, maybe in like a podcast style.
I think that is a really good way to get started for sure. Absolutely.
All right, Eric, is there anything that you wanted to plug at the end of this video? Maybe talk about those quarterly reviews that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so I actually joined Matthew, as people know him as Lamora's Cards. We actually have a podcast that's under that umbrella called Learning CDH.
Hmm.
I hop on those every 3 months. We basically look at 60 plus player tournaments. We might drop it down to 50. It just depends on the amount. We've been, because the January, it was pretty low with the amount of tournaments from like January to March. But now I feel like we're
Yeah.
in the prime of CDH, like summer
Yeah.
tournaments, sets dropping, Final Fantasy's crazy. So we're starting to see a lot of that ramp up. So what we do is we review those. It's based on statistics. It's not our opinions. Every
Mhm.
commenter is always we always get one. Well, I don't agree with your list. It's like it's
Yeah.
not my list. It's not my
This
list.
is data. Yeah.
This is tournament data. You can agree or not whether the deck should be where it's at, but unfortunately, Yuriko still is always in the top 10. No matter what I do,
Yeah.
it's there. You're going to see it if you play in those level events. And that's what we do. We just go over that just to basically kind of break down that data for people, show people what's conversion rates, what's actually maybe the small nuances in those lists. And then personally for me, if you have Korvold questions, just come to our Discord
Yep.
or comment on my primer. Outside of that, I'm a pretty private guy by and large. I'm not
Yeah.
like out here building a brand or anything yet. So I just like enjoying
Yet. Yeah.
CDH
Mm.
and learning. That's really what I care about. I just believe that I've been fortunate enough to play Magic since 1998, and I've played up to the Pro Tour level, played in nationals, won regionals, states, RCQs, PTQs back in the day, junior qualifiers. Was it junior Super Series qualifiers? Those types of things. And I just want to take the knowledge I have from that and other TCGs that I've played at a really high level and basically help people. And that's really my function to me now as a CDH player, is to teach people and maybe try to get some wins here and there.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, we'll see you at the top of the tournament soon. All right. I'm really excited for your tournament performance this coming weekend. So by the time this comes out, it'll probably be over. So, and you've already have won. I'm manifesting it right now, Eric.
I hope so. So for those who don't know, if you know anything about me, I had a son not too long ago, just a few weeks back, and his room. And I've talked to Kyle about what colors I was actually painting his room.
Mm-hmm.
And I have dragon shields that match the color of his room.
Aw.
It's like a
Yeah.
eucalyptus green. So I changed my Korvold deck to the dual matte eucalyptus greens. Dragon Shield, if you want to throw some money at That's a Good Card podcast, you can absolutely do that for them. I don't need anything, maybe just a couple of pack of sleeves here and there.
Of the eucalyptus variety.
Yeah. And I've not got to really test a ton because being a newborn and being on like
Yeah.
a schedule like every 3-4 hours. So I'm basically if have you ever watched My Hero Academia by any chance?
I am not an anime guy. I am
All right.
Japanese, but I am not an anime guy.
Okay, that's fair. For those My Hero Academia fans out there, there's a character named All Might, and he basically has what's called the Vestige World, which is basically all the predecessors of his character and the powers that he has. And
Mm,
at the very tail end of the middle of the arc of the series, he has to draw upon all his predecessors' powers to effectively defeat the bad guy. And that's effectively kind of what I'm doing. The bad guys are the Esper plus or the Esper plus piles or Grixis plus piles. And I'm trying to defeat and the Simic Bros. Those
yeah,
are
and the Simic Bros.
those are the bad guys, and I'm trying to be the good guy that comes in at top 16s. That's my goal. I am quietly optimistic about this list. I don't want to be arrogant at all. I very
Mhm.
much know it's a game of variance, but with the way the games play out, if I had to rank this deck compared to Dockside, will always be disgusting. I think this deck is way more consistent than the Dockside list. I really legitimately believe that
Yeah.
because of the avenues it has.
Yeah.
Dockside's just cracked, you know. So it's one thing that we didn't really talk about was just the dedication to Dockside and the million reanimation slots you had to play. So you had a lot of non hands.
Yeah.
This doesn't really have that. These decks don't have that as much. I think they
Yeah.
mulligan way better. So
Exciting.
we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the channel and just talking about Korvold. Honestly, this is like kind of a dream of mine since I started playing Korvold. So I'm glad that we finally got to put a deep dive resource out there for any Korvold pilots or anyone even remotely interested in the deck and what it does. So I'm excited to go through and push that out. So thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. And we'll see all of you in the Korvold Discord that I'll link down below. Come join us. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Peace.